Good morning, happy Sunday. How are you guys doing? Don't know why I asked that. It's not like I'll be able to hear a response, but I hope you guys are all doing well. Hey, listen, so I wanted to put out this episode today. What it is actually a throwback from episodes that I put out right around February of 2020, right before COVID descended upon us. I mean, it was already kind of there, but we just weren't aware that it was going to affect us and everything that happened after that. So some strange events occurred right around that time, and you can see it. It's actually chronicled on the podcast. I think it started in February, and you read the titles. A lot of the titles were sort of cryptic, but unintentionally. I just was having a lot of weird things happening to me, a lot of synchronistic events that was all kind of tying in with Twilight Zone that I was watching at the time. So if you go back even starting at January 31st, there's an episode called Life and Death Across the Multiverse, and then the next episode was February 3rd. It was TV and the Illusion of Free Will. And then a sort of feedback loop through time was the next episode after that, and then your death date. And then you can kind of see conscious in a Westworld sort of way. So there was a lot happening during that time. The episode after that was called Multiple Incarnations into the Same Life. So what I did, especially seeing right now, the last two videos on my TikTok channel I posted was essentially dealing with I was coming for people on TikTok that seemed to be really excited about the world ending, right? I was seeing a lot of videos on TikTok where people are not wanting to go back to work or whatever because they're obviously climate change is happening right now. This is the apocalypse. And I was seeing comments of from Christians saying, yes, the world is coming, the end of the world is coming, the rapture is about to happen. And but people were low key, not even low key. They were high key, excited at the idea of the world ending. And that shit pissed me off. Stop all of that, right? I'm reading all this stuff. I'm watching all this stuff. And I'm stop it. Okay. We cannot escape from our problems, right? You can't sit back and just wait for the world to end. Okay. Because it's not going to. Okay. We have to fix the issues that we're having right now. And this sort of and what I mean by that is by fix is, I'm not saying we know, you need a violent revolution, right? There are other ways to rebel, right? We're looking around and seeing all these things happening. There are things we can do, right? There are ways we can protest against our, our setup, the way our society is set up, simply by just changing our minds, simply by changing our approach to life, simply by choosing to not live in a traditional way, right? In the way in which it has been sort of imposed on us and how we're supposed to live. Okay. That in itself is a rebellious act, right? Simply choosing to sort of walk away from mainstream society, choosing to turn off your TV and stop watching the news, right? I mean, I'm not saying don't watch movies and stuff like that. Every time somebody says turn off your TV, there's also this weird sort of implication where it's just completely shut off. And we enjoy TV. We enjoy being entertained. I get a lot of ideas from movies and TV shows. So that's not what I mean when I say, turn off your TV. And there are ways for you to consume the media consciously in a healthy manner, right? But when I say turn off your TV, I mean turn off the news, right? Or just don't just sit back and be passively programmed by what is showing up on the TV screen, on the Black Mirror, right? Because it's called programming for a reason. And there's ways to rebel. There's ways to turn your back on the prevailing society, right? By expanding your mind, by educating yourself. I was shadow banned for a little bit on TikTok. And I think it was because I'm constantly encouraging people. I'm not anymore. Because I think the followers, my subscribers came through hard for me. They realized I was being shadow banned, and they were fuck this. And they just started interacting with my posts. and sharing. Like as soon, like a lot of them subscribed, and like as soon as I posted something, they started sharing it, commenting it, interacting with it, and next thing you know, boom, it blew up. So thank you guys for that. If you're listening and you're a follower on TikTok, thank you guys for that. I really appreciate it. But that's a rebellious act, right? Because what was happening was, the videos that I would put out, it's like stuff that kind of gets people to think, right? That's my whole shtick. That's my whole passion in life. I just want people to think, right? And it's purely selfish reasons. I fucking hate small talk. I don't want to sit and talk to you about how my day went. I want to sit and talk about parallel universes, aliens, right? Right? The nature of our reality. What is really going on? Are we living in a dystopia? Is this hell? Did we choose to come back here? Do you believe in reincarnation? These sort of things. I don't want to talk about my day. I don't want to talk about the fact that it's Monday. I don't give a fuck about the weather. Like, let's make life more interesting. And the way you do that is not by watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians and The Bachelor all the time. It's by, we have so much information available to us right now. We are living in the information age. You have stuff on YouTube. You can literally listen to audiobooks, right? At the drop of a hat on your phone, on your little personal computer that you carry everywhere. You can do it. Right there, right? We have so much access to information, and we are discouraged from accessing it, from talking about it, from intelligent what is the word? Not Discord. Although I do have a Discord channel, Discourse. Check out the Discord channel, on solo.to/Jolie Artist. You'll see the link there. But we're discouraged from that, right? And so people who are putting out information that's thought provoking, that is like expanding people's minds, those are people that get like shadow banned. It's not even you saying something potentially controversial. It's just, is this person encouraging people to think? Is this person encouraging people to challenge authority? No, we cannot have that, suppress that shit. And to interact and boost, people like a thinker like myself that thinks similar to you, right? By doing that, you're forcing these ideas that you guys think about, which is why you're subscribed to the podcast, right? By interacting with, that's a rebellious act, right? We're not just passively allowing that shit to happen, right? Like we're seeing, okay, my favorite thinker, is being shadow banned. Like, how do they have 100,000, followers, but each video only has 200 plays? That doesn't make any sense. Why isn't your video showing up on my FYP page? That doesn't make any sense, right? And I'm not saying this doesn't apply to just me. If you have a favorite, other thinkers that you enjoy their ideas, help them out. You get what I mean? Help them out. If they're talking about, hey, my stuff isn't, getting seen, is not getting heard, or if you notice that you're not getting notifications for that, for their stuff, rebel. It's not always about a rebellious act. Isn't always about taking up, arms and all of that. You don't have to do all of that. You work smarter, right? You work together, right? Don't just be oh no, we're being shadow banned, and then just passively accept that shit. We know how the algorithm works, right? If everybody that does see the video, or see the, for the people who do see it, right? The people who your content, right? Their content has been limited to, interacts with it, not just likes it, but comments on it, hits the share button or whatever. That's how we push our ideas out. And it's not to the benefit of just the creator. It also benefits you, right? Because one, the reason why you're, subscribing to a particular thinker or content creator is because you're vibing on the same level, right? You're on the same wavelength, right? So you share the same ideas, you guys, like you and I, right? You're listening to me because you vibe with me, you're picking up what I'm putting down. But a lot of the stuff that I talk about on here isn't mainstream. That's why you're listening to it, right? But how do you make that shit mainstream? This is not a one person show. It's not just me. It's not just you, right? It benefits you as well to interact with these creators' works and get it viral, because then the things that you think about do end up becoming more mainstream, so that then you can sit and have a conversation with a person about aliens and the nature of reality, right? So don't just passively accept this shit. If you don't like it, change it. If you have a, like I said, I keep kind of reiterating because it's important, you have to hear it. If you have a favorite thinker and you notice that their stuff is being suppressed, it doesn't benefit you to just throw your arms up and be like, okay, well, that's just what's happening, right? You come together, right? Because the suppression of them, right? They're a representation of you. You get it? They represent you, right? If you don't have a YouTube channel, if you don't have a TikTok channel where you're talking about this stuff, but these are your ideas, well, that person is a representation of you. So their success is also a success for you, right? So now, like that video, it's almost that I just put out on Friday where I'm talking about, the apocalypse happens every day. And I'll kind of give a brief run through or whatever. That video, the last time I checked, had like 800,000 views. That's dope. Okay, so that's 800,000 people that have now seen those. Not saying everybody agrees with it, but that's 800,000 people that have seen that. And ideas like memes spread like wildfire. So if you agreed, even with like 80% of what I said in that video, or like, things in there resonated with you, that is 800,000 people that have now been exposed to that idea, so that it increases the likelihood that the next time you want to have a conversation that's not a basic conversation about the fucking weather, right? Right? And you just say, hey, what do you think about the nature of reality? Have you ever thought about, parallel universes? You can, one, show the video that clearly sort of like illustrates your thoughts. Right? So you're not kind of searching for words or whatever, right? So that helps you. And then the person can see that and say, wow, this has like millions of views or whatever, because eventually it's going to hit like 1 million, right? Then that makes you seem less crazy, right? It also, you guys know how I feel about that word, but you know what I mean. It also kind of bolsters your thinking. So it's a win-win, right? We're all in this together, right? So it does help us out. And so I just wanted to take the time really briefly to extend, 11 minutes in, to extend my thank you to subscribers of the podcast, of the TikTok channel, of the YouTube, that kind of like we rebelled in a way, right? Because the reason why books get banned, right? People want to talk about, okay, weapons being banned or whatever. But there's also a book, an idea, sometimes is more dangerous than a weapon. I mean, the mind is a powerful thing, and sometimes getting enough people to change the way they think about certain things, right? Because the only way people can be controlled, which is why we have the programming, right? If you cannot physically restrain a person, because we live in a society where we are basically programmed to believe that this is a free country, but it's an illusion. It's not really free, right? They present to us the illusion of choice, right? Red guy or blue guy, right? It's an illusion of choice. And as you heard in my Matrix episode, you get coerced into choices, right? Left wing, right wing, they're the same bird, right? Right? Democrat, Republican, it's still the government. They're just trying to force you to choose one. They never allow you to see, okay, who are the Green Party candidates? Who are the Libertarian candidates, right? They're trying to force you to think that these are the only two options that you have. That's not then a choice, right? You're being coerced, right? And if they're presenting you with these two options, they're not even options that you chose. If they're presenting you with these two options, you also need to be suspicious about that, right? On my TikTok channel, I talked about that, right? Like I have this friend who doesn't like eating fruit. And every time they come over, I go, hey, would you like some fruit? And they always say no. So then one day I decided to present them with a choice. And I said, would you like red grapes or green grapes? The moment you present somebody with the illusion of a choice, you force their hand. They think they're still exercising their free will. Yes, they can always say no, but 99% of the time, they're going to choose something because you gave them a choice, or the illusion of a choice. So then they're going to make a choice. But for me, it didn't really matter. It doesn't matter what choice they make. I just wanted them to eat fruit, right? And so it's the same thing that happens to us in our society, right? Red candidate or blue candidate, they don't really care. They just want you to choose to be ruled. They just want you to choose to be governed. That's it. So no matter what person is in power, you're essentially saying this asshole that is like, this is a dirty politician, right? Or a dirty businessman who is in the pockets of corporations, right? I'm choosing them. And I actually got into an argument with this one guy who like follows me, but then every time I post a video wants to hop up on my shit and mansplain, so I have to block him. Or I think I removed him off my shit. But he was like, well, what are you going to do? You're going to lead the revolution? Like, good luck with that. Like the lesser, you just choose the lesser of evil, of two evils. And I'm like, that is a stupid argument. You're acknowledging that you are being presented with evil choices. And I've been there. I get that mindset, and I've been stupid too. Okay. And then I grew up. And the beauty of this podcast is that all of my ideas, everything that I say, you can always go back and find moments where I was stupid, and then I came through and I was like, oh, that was fucking bullshit. You know what I mean? But I'm open. I keep my mind open. This person just always wants to argue. That's why I didn't call them stupid. I just said it in my head. But that is why I removed them off my shit, because it's like, you're not even trying to like have like a conversation with me. You're talking to me like you think I'm an idiot. And that's disrespectful as fuck. And I don't have to listen to that. Fuck off, you know? But I never said that when I say we need a revolution, the third option is always a revolution. You're immediately going to violence. It doesn't have to be violence. One of the ways you revolt, for example, right? Turn that shit off. They're pumping out all of this money. Imagine if we got just half of the population, not even half, like maybe like 10% more people to just stop watching the news. You don't think that affects them, that hits their pockets? All these companies, corporations that are paying them to lie to you? That's an act of rebellion. Just refusing to participate is an act of rebellion. It doesn't have to always be violent. Just turning your back, just walking away, right? If somebody's trying to antagonize you into a fight, right? You take your power back, not by doing what they want you to do. You know, sometimes engaging in violence is a trap, because especially when it's like things like you know, it's happening right now. It's like the government or whatever, because everybody's like talking about Second Amendments, and they're trying to take our guns. At the end of the day, they have more weapons. So that's not a battle that we would win, right? The greatest battle happens in the mind. You know, re-educating yourself. I put out another video on the TikTok channel. It was like a stitch. It kind of starts off like the sound had been muted. So like a lot of people kind of like started playing it, then scrolled off it because they thought something was wrong with the video. But if you keep listening, I do actually go in and I talk about a book. It's called The Will to Change. The Will to Change, The Will to Change by Bell Hooks. Please listen to it. Please read it, okay? What it does is she addresses masculine pain and how patriarchy essentially is just as harmful to men as it is to women. Okay. And I know some people, when you hear the word patriarchy, we have been programmed to immediately stop listening or whatever, but hear me out. I'm going to read to you guys real quick my notes from when I was reading the book, just to kind of get you guys like to understand like why I love this book so much. But she is a feminist, but she takes it from a humanist approach. It's not about, okay, let's just fight for women's rights and men are all evil and fuck men. No, which is what I loved about that, because at her core, you could tell that this is a woman who's passionate about human rights, about a human being's rights, abilities to be able to be a full-fledged human being. Okay. And it's not about, okay, men versus women. She doesn't force you into the false dichotomy, like the duality that we're forced into. Get it? She approaches the whole idea of the patriarchy being toxic, but from a humanist perspective. And I loved it. But here's some of my notes that I wrote. We raise men from babies to be killers. That sounds extreme, but you think about it, right? What she talks about is the fact that you get let's say I gave birth to a boy and a girl. right? My daughter, I'm not like this, but I'm saying like this is how traditionally masculinity is imposed on a human baby, on a human child, right? So if I have a little girl, and I mean I do, but if she's like running around, she hurts, like she gets hurt, we tell her, oh, come here, right? She's feeling pain and she needs to be consoled. Like, for example, it's not even like a human, this is not even a human thing. This is just an animal thing. This is anything, animal, animated, animus, like alive, okay? I was giving my puppy, I just got a new puppy, guys. His name is Morpheus. He will be getting featured in a video one of these days or whatever. But yeah, Morpheus, I call him a ginger doodle because he's supposed to be a golden doodle, but he's like a redhead. So he's a ginger doodle. But I was giving a Morpheus a shower today. I'm giving him a bath, and he's a baby. So it's like his first time that he, was like exposed to like water like that, like the shower, and like there was like a loud noise and he was like shaking. You know what I mean? And your instinct is to console him because you can see that he's feeling fear, right? And then I turned on the dryer to like dry him off or whatever, and he like freaked out, panicked, and then he like ran under my arm, under my like my armpit, and was just shaking, right? And he just please console me, please, I'm scared, okay? So that reaction of, okay, I'm afraid, please nurture me, is a built-in instinctive reaction that we're all sort of, our physical bodies anyway, are all programmed with, okay? But that doesn't go away. The need to be loved, I think that's why so many people were getting puppies, particularly during COVID, because we have been so isolated. We're not allowed, we're being forced to social distance. You can't hug people, all of that. But that inherent need to be loved is still there. It doesn't go anywhere, right? And we're all walking around in pain, in emotional pain. So we need, like, at least our puppies are, I mean, I'm speaking from experience, but at least our puppies, like, we can hug them. So you're seeing more and more people getting pets. That doesn't go away. But however, when you raise a child, a male son, right? And as opposed to a female son, a male son, and he's in pain, after a certain point, like mothers are programmed to not show affection to their child. No, you have to be a man. Toughen up. Take that emotion that you're feeling right now, that pain that you're feeling, and shove that shit deep down inside, because how else can our society like raise men to go off and die in some bullshit war, right? That's what's going on. Okay, this shit is deep. Okay, because it's it's deeper than we even realize. It's deeper than we even realize. So now you have young boys who don't know how to process their feelings, who are intentionally by society, by the roles, the gender roles that have been imposed upon them, right? By society at large, by quote authority, right? The authority of culture, the authority of society, programming, all of that. Now turning into men who don't know how to process their emotions, right? And they're taught to only channel like their emotions through two avenues: pain, expressed through either anger or rage. And that's it. If you show sadness, if you cry, if you're scared, you're not a man, right? In our society, a woman doesn't have to earn the right to be called a woman, but a man has to earn the right to be called a man. And the only way he's allowed to earn that right is through violence. And you'll see that, right? Like I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they were talking about how like they don't like sports. Yeah. And I was like, oh no, like I was joking because I turn everything into a joke because that's just me. And I was like, oh no, how can you not like sports? I guess you're not a man. Like clearly I'm joking. But then their response was, well, I take, is it Muay Thai? And so I kick motherfuckers in the face all the time. So, my response to that was, why is an expression of violence the way your retort to the fact that, you're a man? You get it? So, and that was a conversation. We were talking about this book, and I was like trying to encourage him to read the book. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, this is a problem, right? We have full-fledged human beings, who are in pain and are not allowed to be in pain, not allowed to express sadness. Like, not like your puppy, your dog is allowed to feel fear and to show it and be consoled by it. But like a child, a male child, if he shows the same fear, the same sadness, the same emotions, he's not allowed to just be that, right? He's not like held, right? And it's typically, it's not just the fathers that do this. Mothers do it too, because they're trying to toughen their sons out, because some of them there's this underlying sort of fear that like, oh, my little boy is going to be gay if I don't like emotionally like abuse him or whatever, right? So I've got to like toughen him up and harden him up, and just like so that he doesn't become soft and become gay, like, which is stupid, because that's not how sexuality works, like where people aren't just thinking things through. So, and eventually we end up in a society where, the majority of men are expressing their emotions or channeling their emotions in negative ways. Like, it's negative energy. And then look at, our murder rates, mostly men. Our suicide rates, mostly men. Our assault rates, mostly men. Now, there are some feminists who want to say, okay, that's just a feature of the masculine gender, but it's not. It's how they are socialized. That's the problem. And so this book, The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, addresses that. And if you can read that book and it changes your approach to the way you raise your sons, to the way you deal with your fathers, to the way you deal with your brothers, okay? That is an act of rebellion, because that's you turning your back on traditional masculinities. That's how you revolt. Right there. It doesn't have to be a violent protest on the street. Nothing against that, but you could change your mind. You could change your actions in small ways. You get enough people doing it. That's how we affect change in the society. The end of the world is not coming, guys. I'm going to get back to that, but I want to finish this thought. Back to my notes. Raised men from babies to be killers, emotionally dwarfed their humanity, brainwashed them with the ideology of nationalism, then sent them off to die and be maimed in an unjust war. 9/11, anyone? Afghanistan war, anyone? Come on now. And then when he tries to speak about his pain, society silences him. Have you guys seen this video? Ooh, my chest. I don't know why that hit me, man. That made me emotional. There's a video of a vet. He's standing up and there's a convention or whatever. I think George W. Bush II is speaking, and he's just going off. And he's saying, you sent me to die. You sent my brothers to die. You sent my family to die. I went there and I served, and you lied. You lied. That is an expression of emotion. And two women, it's fucked up. Two women jumped up and pulled him down, and then they dragged him out of there. I got to find the video. You got to find the video. It's on TikTok somewhere. Find it. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. But that is a visualization of how, women want to act like, okay, and then I'm about to touch some people's feelings, but here we go. Women want to act like the issue that we have with men, right, and the patriarchy is only something that's imposed upon us by men. But women are just as much, some women, not all obviously, just as much advocates of the patriarchy as men. Hello. Okay. Carry on. Male pain. The deep inner misery of men, ways in which men are victimized by patriarchy. In order to heal, you must first make yourself conscious of your subconscious wounds. We are all imprisoned by a system that undermines our mental health. I know that when some people hear the words patriarchy, they're programmed to shut down and close off their minds. So let's use the words traditional masculinity. Keep an open mind, read the book. It may just end up saving a life. Okay, so check that book out, please. Now back to the apocalypse. So I posted a video about how everybody like that are geeked out, excited about the apocalypse, happening. I was like, let me introduce you to something called quantum immortality and a many worlds interpretation. For those of you who are familiar with me, those of you who've listened to the other podcast, Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse, and have been listening to this podcast for years. Shout out to you guys. Just had a couple of people join the Discord that had like followed me from when I like posted like an ad on Reddit. Like I didn't even think that ad worked. I just did it for like a week or something like that. And I was like, this is so cool. But for those of you familiar with me, like, like that's my thing. Like that's just been like my obsession. Excuse that noise. That's just been my obsession. Like that's just my life drive. It's like parallel universes. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But that's been my thing. So that video, I sort of was just like basically saying like, I don't want to spoil the video. It's a good video. Go watch it. It's on my TikTok channel, Joey.artist, like Joey.artist. Okay. And I was just like, let me just take all of you guys getting hyped up about the end of the world, and I'm going to shut that shit down. Okay. Because the world isn't going to end, or I should say the world ends every day. All right. I don't literally mean like every day, but like shit happens and people are constantly shifting realities and we're not even talking about it. Right. And I didn't directly speak to simulation hypothesis, but that is at the core, the foundation of what would cause that to be happening, that would allow for consciousness to shift from one reality to another. Right. So the simulation hypothesis is an underlying sort of ideology that supports my argument there. And when I posted that video, somebody like stitched my video with their video, and this lady was like telling a story about how in 2020 she sort of had like a dissociative event where all of a sudden like she was telling her family, this was right before, actually I think she said it was 2019, but she was telling her family that she was patient 0, there's a virus coming and it's going to cause death, please stay home. And she was like, I know this is going to sound crazy, which literally is my favorite story. Like, is my favorite way to start a story. Anytime a person starts a story with, I know this is going to sound crazy, I am all ears. Like, yeah, give me some of that. Give me that. I want to hear it. Tell me all about your story that is not crazy. I'm totally interested in that. And you could tell, like she was telling the truth because she turned off the comments. Right? Like, so it's not like she was doing it for hype. It was like she just wanted to share her story. So she turned off the comments. So that was intriguing. But it made me think of my podcast and how back in 2020, like I said, I just referenced, the titles. I sort of went through like a weird period where I was like, I sort of like started stockpiling masks and gloves for no fucking reason, and toilet paper, but you can hear that, on the podcast. I'm like, you guys just go like, put stuff aside just in case. But before that, like in late 2019, I bought a bunch of masks. I don't know why. I bought a bunch of gloves. Don't know why. I bought a bunch of disinfectant lotion. Don't know why. Sent it all to my family. No idea why. Okay. Just did it intuitively. So that was weird. But the other thing was that I had a series of synchronistic events happening in real time. And I talk about it. You're about to hear it. It's after I finish this sort of blurb. There's going to be a ding, and then you'll hear, I kind of attached like 3 of those episodes from 2020 to this episode. That's why this particular episode is so long. But I wanted to explain, what was going on. So like a lot of weird stuff was happening around that time, and I don't want to like spoil it, but essentially it was like something, like some sort of intelligence, I don't know, the universe or whatever, maybe, but I do believe that the simulation itself has its own intelligence. It is what it is. But something was trying to get my attention, and maybe it was a future version of myself, right? And I break that down in the upcoming episode, so you hear that. But ultimately, it was March 20th, 2020 was essentially a date that was like broadcast to me, and I chronicle it on the episode. It was weird. I can't make this shit up. It's there. You know what I mean? Like, it's already recorded. So you don't even have to take my word for it. I've added it to this podcast, and obviously you can tell, that it wasn't recently recorded, because if you go back, scroll all the way back, you'll see these episodes and the timestamp. I cannot alter that. So it happened. And long story short, I was, quote, told, I don't know how else to say it, but to stay home. 3/20/2020. It was 3/20s, right? March 20th, 2020. But leading up to that, I thought that I was going to die on March 20th, 2020. And I explored all of that. So this is all weird and in real time. It's like super trippy. So, sometimes shit happens and you try to tell a story and people don't believe you because like there's no evidence. Well, that's my evidence. It's right there. It's the podcast, which I'm grateful for. So I thought it was me. And so I was telling everyone, just stay the fuck at home. I don't know what is about to happen. And this was back like January and February. So it was 2 months before, like, we were watching COVID happen in China, and we were like, oh, that's too bad. And then we just went about our lives like this shit wasn't going to happen to us. Like, this stuff like this happens all the time in Asia. And it was never going to be a pandemic. Like SARS, the first SARS, never like caused what happened here. Ebola, I was like, oh shit, that's fucked up what's happening over there. But like, we just went about our day. So, but you could see it was happening like in January and February by the episodes and the titles even, that like I was being led to like a point. And so it was March 20th, 2020. And you'll hear how I got to the conclusion, and I was telling everybody to stay home. Long story short, I thought, okay, maybe it's just going to be me, but then I extended it to like my loved ones, like, stay home. And I told my mom not to go out, but she was like insisting on like traveling anyway, because she didn't like believe me. Long story short, March 20th, 2020 was when the stay at home order in California was instituted. So everybody had to stay home right on that date. March 20th, 2020. It was like, I'm sorry, I take that back. It was March 19th, 2020 was when it was announced. And it was like late on March 19th that March 20th was the stay at home order. So they have to announce it 24 hours in advance. So 24 hours before 3/20/2020 was when the stay at home order was issued, and it was issued for 3/20/2020. This all happened. It's all on here. And so the episodes that I didn't include, just out of, like, I didn't want to keep making it too long. You can scroll all the way back to last year, the first, 2-3 months. And it's right there. And so I included in this episode, like the 2 episodes. I think it was like from the 6th and the 9th, I think. That were centered around the Twilight Zone episode, but you can listen to anyone prior to that and just see how I was being led in real time. Super trippy. And then I added the episode from March 24th, after like the stay-at-home order was like instituted or whatever, like 4 days later, because I had to process all of that shit. And I was like, I'm alive, bitches. So it was all. So I wanted to take the time. This is sort of like an unconventional episode. I will do a more conventional episode, particularly dealing with a lot of the books that I've been reading next week. Midnight Library was recommended to me on Friday, and I like breezed through it yesterday, and I loved it. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit more. But I just wanted to share with you guys, particularly like new subscribers, like this is real talk, and that life is not what we think it is. But and the ideas that I talk about, because most people aren't going to scroll back like a year episode. So I wanted to kind of make people listen to it to understand that, one, I've been talking about this stuff for a really long time, and a lot of these ideas, if you're not been exposed to before, it's something that you kind of came to. If you think about it, you're not alone. All right. I've thought about this. I've talked about this. And there are people kind of in the same boat with you. It's just, we're not connected. with each other. We don't talk to each other, right? Because we're taking these ideas that we have, but we're like kind of bottling them up because we're afraid of what people will say about us. And that's why I kind of started this podcast basically saying, like, one, thank you for the people who did go out of the way to interact with that post that is now going viral. That I posted on Friday, because that's how we get our ideas mainstream. That's how we get our ideas to be more common so that we can talk to each other and find each other, right? And then when you come together, when you find your tribe, right, and you come together, that is how we can start coming together and affecting change. It's not always, you don't always have to do things overtly, right? A revolt, a revolution, it isn't always you taking up arms. Like I said, if you change people's minds, that's why books were always banned. Voltaire was banned for a reason, right? If you change people's minds, you can change the whole system, right? Which is why they work so hard to keep our minds controlled in a particular way, okay? So sometimes it really is as simple as just changing your mind. Sometimes a rebellious act, a revolutionary act is something as simple as doing the opposite of what you've been programmed to do. All right, so here are the episodes. You can stop here if you want to, if you've heard them. If you want a refresher, go through. I would recommend increasing the speed. I always say this. This podcast is not just on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, I'm on Spotify, Apple, Google, all of the above. So just increase the speed. Get through the information. I think your brain can listen to information at at least 1.5 to 2x speed, and still process what's being said. So do that. It will actually make the episode sort of maybe not take up as much time, unless you love listening to my voice at the normal speed, then yeah, go for it. But yeah, I just want to take the time once again to thank everybody. New subscribers, welcome. Always appreciate you. If you want to book a one-on-one chat with me, it's all on the link in the solo.to/jollyartist. Do it. That's a Zoom chat. Join the Discord. There's always a wealth of information always being supplied on the Discord. It's relatively new now. I should say it's just been relatively recently active. So more and more people are joining, but let's find each other, right? Let's connect with each other. We need to do this more now than never, right? The world, even if the world ends, right? Consciousness doesn't. We're just going to get shifted to a parallel universe where we survive whatever killed us, and it goes on in perpetuity. So if you don't like the way society is, I'm sorry, but the apocalypse isn't going to be what saves us. Apocalypses happen every day. That is basically what I'm getting at. Okay. Asteroids taking us out every day. I don't mean literally every day, but you know what I mean. So we have to fix our problems. Can't escape from it, can't run from our problems. We got to fix it. And sometimes simple changes are enough to make a big impact. Okay? All right. Thanks for listening. Be on the lookout for an episode. I think I'll put one out in a couple of days or whatever. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks. Yay! Okay, I'm going to start by saying that for every podcast that you're listening to this right now, any podcast publisher. So if you're on Spotify, Overcast, Apple Podcasts, there is a function that allows you to speed up any podcast so that you can listen to it faster. I'm saying all that to say that sometimes I talk slowly because obviously this is off the top of my head and I'm just trying to get the information out. So I said, I should start letting people know, hey, speed it up. Just hit the 2x speed and listen to me faster just to kind of get through what I feel like is me kind of, building up. Now, of course, that's probably me being overly critical, but I just want to start with that. Now, today has been a really strange day for me. Actually, the last few years have been really strange as far as experiences that I've been having. But today the day where I was like, all right, something definitely is going on. Now, there's going to be a lot of buildup before I get to the point, but what I'm going to get to is that, if this only happened once, I could dismiss it as coincidence. If it only happened twice, okay, you can still kind of dismiss it as coincidence. But the fact that this consistently keeps happening, and it's happening in clusters in my life, that like, it's literally like, I'm not going to say it's freaking me out. I just find it very fascinating now, like extremely interesting now. Like, I'm like, okay, whatever is trying to get me, to kind of start paying attention, you've got my attention, right? It's fascinating. Okay, so now you're probably thinking, what is she talking about? Okay, so I'm gonna get to that. I don't think that every human being experiences time chronologically. And what I mean by that is that, nobody is equal, right? Equality is more or less a myth. I mean, we as human beings can try to aspire towards equality, but even my mom always told me not all fingers are equal. Not all 5 fingers are equal. So equality is a myth. I experience things different than you, and you experience things different than me. And people have said that even just going straight down to color, they have said that, people don't, there's no way of knowing if the way I see the color red is the same way you see the color red. Like, there's no way I can say that. I could say, okay, well, the way I see red is, like a strawberry or whatever. But how do I know that my red isn't your blue, right? So my perception of reality could look vastly different than yours. Like, this is like, there's just, you can't prove that, right? That this isn't what's going on. And I even suspect that the way people see faces might be different. Only because, like, for example, like, I paint full time. That's what I do, for work. And when people come to view my art, a lot of people, not all, but there are some people who go, is this you? Are you painting yourself? But then when it's like clearly a self-portrait, or what I think is clearly a self-portrait, like, they don't see it. And a painting that I don't think looks anything like me. You know what I mean? I mean, like, I'm not painting the same faces over and over again. Like, I'm not that vain. I've got like 50 or, so paintings. It would be a bit insane of me to just keep, not saying, okay, Frida Kahlo did the same thing. I'm not speaking on that. I think she was telling her own life story through her art, but I'm painting portraits, and it's a different, kind of shtick here. Maybe shtick is not the right word, but a different approach to art, and when you look at my pieces, they're not the same. I mean, you have one woman that's like extremely dark skinned, another woman that's light skinned. I've painted orange people. I've painted purple people. I've painted people with cleft chin, with thin lips, with different eyes. And yet some people will still come in and go, oh, is that you? And when I kind of see that, I would go like, or I experience it, I would go like, are you not seeing, like, are you not seeing my face the way I see my face? Like, I'm really starting to think that that's, the way I look to me may not be the way you look, I look to you, and vice versa, But I also think that extends to anything, to taste. Sweet might taste different to me than it tastes to you. There's just no way of proving that. So when I say equality is a myth, what I mean by that is I'm not saying that we shouldn't aspire to equality as a society. I'm just saying that it's just, it's just, we're not equal. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just, we're different. That's it. We're just, each human being is uniquely different, period. And so even with time being relative, right? Like today I went to the dentist, and I was talking to one of the ladies in the front desk, and she was saying, is it just me, or is February going by like super fast, right? She's like, can you believe that by next week we're already going to be halfway through February? And what I said to her was, yeah, that is kind of crazy. For me, January felt like it was like really slow. And she responded, yeah, I actually saw a meme today that said like January was like the longest year ever. And we had a chuckle. But then that got me thinking like, okay, so people are experiencing time differently, right? January doesn't feel like a month to some people. But then I met up with like an older woman today, and she was talking to me, and she was saying how, and she's like in her 80s, and she was saying how for her, January has actually gone by really fast. Like it went by really fast for her. And of course, that made me think of Albert Einstein's, I guess, discovery or whatever, or quote, whatever you want to call it. It says time is, it's not absolute, it's relative. Everybody experiences time differently. So then if that's the case, then, what does that truly mean? Now, bringing it back to me and my experiences and what I keep saying, like I keep kind of have the experiences I keep trying to, like, I can't talk. Bringing it back to the experiences that I keep having, I feel as though there is an aspect of me that is either able to communicate with my future self, or I may not be experiencing time chronologically. And if that's the case, then I feel that I'm not the only one. Like I can't be the only person, right, who's experiencing that. And what I mean by that is this. So like I've said in other podcasts, I have 2 podcasts. So I have this one, I have another one. And then the other one, I talk about, this world being in simulation, and I'll sit and I'll write stuff down. And then I'll go and I'll record an episode. And then like literally after I record the episode, like a week, a month, even that same day, I will run into like an article. I will read, something on, I'll read a book, or I'll hear something on Audible that basically says more or less exactly what I just said in that episode that day. All right. But that happens to me so much now that like at one point, like I was just like, okay, what the fuck is really happening? Like I really like it I'm like, what, right? Like if that happens to you enough times, you do start to go, okay, am I going fucking crazy here? Or, and it's not like, it's always, it's a book that I have never read before. It's just, and the fact that I stumble across these articles usually within the same amount of time of like an episode I just finished is just weird. And it's like, okay, what comes first? Am I, obviously chronologically speaking, I've recorded the episode today, but then I find the information that supports what I recorded on that episode like 2, 3, 4 days later. Now, some people might dismiss it and just call it, oh, it's synchronicity, blah, 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 whatever. I don't know what the fuck that means. Like, don't just throw a word out there. Oh, that's synchronicity. Like that fucking explains it. That doesn't help me. Okay. It doesn't help me. I've had like 15 episodes on that, on the other podcast, and every single time it happens. It keeps happening consistently over it's been 2 years. 2018 is when I started recording, almost 2 years. And this happens to me consistently. You can't just say, oh, it's synchronicity. And then I'm just supposed to just take that word like that's supposed to define anything. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? So now today, I'm going to tell you what happened today. All right. So story time. Here we go. Today, Yesterday, I finished a painting I've been working on for the last couple of weeks. And I was like, okay, that's done. I'm going to start a new painting. So I did the first 2-3 layers or whatever of the body. As I'm painting the body, like I'm like halfway through, the second layer or whatever. And I'm looking at this painting and I'm like, why does this painting feel like I've painted it before? And I literally stopped. Like if there was a recording device, you watch me, I'm down there by myself. You watch me stop, turn, look at my other paintings just to make sure I'm not like making a copy of a painting that I've already painted before. Reassure myself and turn back and keep painting, right? And I'm like, this feels really familiar. And it wasn't like a deja vu. It was just like, I recognized the painting. And actually that has more and more been happening with my pieces. Like I'll finish a painting and I'll look at it and it doesn't feel new to me. And you can argue it's like, oh, because you're spending so much time working on it that after a while it kind of loses the familiarity, blah, 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 whatever bullshit you want to, come up with to dismiss my experience. But the fact of the matter is, that's not the case. The painting that I usually start off intending to paint never looks anything like the painting that I end up with. So that's not the case. And that sense of like, I've seen this before, this looks really familiar, I almost can't shake it. So I started that painting yesterday. And when I got to the hair, I was scrolling through like my assortment of references, and I saw this lady with like beautiful wavy red hair, and I was like, you know what? I like that, but maybe not that shade of red, right? So I was like, all right, today I'm not gonna work today. I'm not gonna paint today. I had some appointments that I had to get along with or whatever, and so I was like, okay, today's gonna be my off day. I'm gonna find the perfect shade of red hair, curly red hair, right? Loosely curly / deep wavy red hair. And so from appointment to appointment, whenever I had some downtime, I would kind of scroll through, just Google or whatever, Pinterest, just looking for like the perfect shade of red hair. And I found about 5 or 6 pictures of women wearing like the shade of red hair that I wanted, and I saved it to my phone. Okay, so that was what I did more or less throughout the day. Then I come home and I sat down in my same spot I sit every day. When it's time for me to unwind, in the last couple of months or a couple of weeks or whatever, I've been unwinding with an episode of the classic Twilight Zone. Now, you guys will recall in my previous episodes, I actually talked about that right around New Year's every year I watch the classic black and white Twilight Zone episodes. I don't watch the new ones. I don't watch the ones in color. They're not even on Netflix. It's just kind of been like a thing for me that every New Year's, that's what I do. And in the past, I would, on New Year's Eve to New Year's Day, I would just sit and turn it on AMC because they would have it. And I just watched back to back whatever came on. But this year, I didn't do it on New Year's Eve. I actually went to bed at like 9:30 because I was fucking tired and I didn't give a shit. But then like the next couple of days, I was like, oh shit, like I didn't watch the Twilight Zone. I got to go watch the Twilight Zone. So I found it on Netflix and I started watching it. So between like January 3rd and today, I pretty much watched all the episodes. But if you go and look on Netflix, you'll see that Netflix doesn't have season 4. So as of today, I pretty much watched all the episodes that I felt that I was going to watch. I always kind of skip the Western ones just because, that's not my thing. I like the ones more that deal with time and with dreams and, reality changing and things like that. So, and robots and the future and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, well, let me go on like Amazon. First I was going to go to Hulu, but then I was like, let me go on Amazon to see if they have season 4 on Prime. All right. So I go on Amazon Prime and I search Twilight Zone and I see all the seasons that they have. It's available on Prime. Season 4 is there, but it's not like free. Like you got to pay for it. And I was like, I'm not doing that right now. But then I looked and I saw it's a Twilight Zone, Rod Serling's Lost Classics. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the something called the Mandela effect. If you aren't, Google it. But for me, I have watched the Twilight Zone since I was like a kid. Like I said, this is something that I've done every New Year's. And for me, I can't even say Serling because it's like weird. Like it's always been Rod Serling for me with the T. But now it's Rod Serling, and that's, to me, it's a Mandela effect for me. Now, this episode, Rod Serling's Lost Classics, when I tapped on it, it said featuring James Earl Jones. And so it was actually, so they'd taken the old writings of Rod Serling's, and then they had produced it in the 90s, and then they had James Earl Jones kind of do the narration. And I was like, all right, well, I don't typically like the in-color Twilight Zones, but I'm going to go with it because it's James Earl Jones. And, fuck it. let's just see, So my whole life, I've never sat and watched a color, like in color, Twilight Zone episode. But today was the day that I decided, okay, I'm going to do it. So I turned it on, I hit play. And that's the other thing. So another person affected by the Mandela effect is James Earl Jones with the Luke, I am your father thing changing to no, I am your father. So I remember thinking, like, as I hit play, like Rod Sterling, and then James Earl Jones connected together on this one episode. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Haha. And I didn't think anything else of it beyond that point until I hit play. So over the last 3 episodes, you can go and you can see when these things have been published. What I've been basically kind of talking about life being like the way we experience life. We treat life as though it's happening in like real time. But if time is happening all at once, then that means that it's like everything that ever will happen has already happened. And it's almost like a pre-recorded, like, film or DVD. I used the word DVD and I referenced the word DVD in a previous episode. Your consciousness is just now experiencing it. You're watching it kind of unfold. You have like limited free will here and there, like the choices that you make on the micro level, but more or less you're basically having a VR experience. And before your consciousness even entered this reality, everything has already kind of been established. The same way, like before you buy a DVD or CD-ROM of a video game, everything has already been kind of thought of by the programmers and put on the CD-ROM or whatever. So I said that. I mean, you can go and hit play on my previous episode. I think it's called like TV and the Illusion of Free Will, and I talked about that. Okay, so now, at this point, I'm going to say, like, I don't expect you to take my word for it. But I also want you to understand I'm not going to sit and record a podcast episode, about something like this if it didn't happen the way I'm saying it happened, right? I have no reason to make this up. There are other things that I have written out that I want to talk about, but this one I was just like, all right, I got to fucking say something because this is really weird. Okay. So the last 3 episodes are kind of alluded to the fact that everything that happens that we experience already has happened and we're just experiencing it. Okay. Now I go and I turn on this episode. And when I look up, I do the same thing every time I watch something. I always kind of have my phone and I'm usually looking through references or something like that. And then I make the TV compete for my attention from the phone, right? So if it's good enough to get me to put my phone down, then I'll look up from my phone or I'll put my phone down and I'll start watching the movie or the TV show or whatever it is. I rarely do both, but one of them has to be more interesting than the other. So at one point, like I looked up in this episode and there was a fucking clown. I don't like clowns. But that's what caught my attention. And then I noticed that the main character was this woman with curly red hair. And I was like, that's interesting. I spent the whole day looking through pictures of women with curly red hair. Now there's a woman with curly red hair. Okay, whatever. Now in this episode, this woman, she has an argument with her boyfriend or fiance or whatever. They were supposed to go see a movie featuring Cary Grant, and it's in black and white. Okay. So she leaves it's a mild argument. It was more like a scuffle or whatever you want to call it, but it wasn't like a serious argument. So she ends the conversation with her fiance or boyfriend or whatever. They were supposed to go to the matinee together. But he had to work. So she ends up going to the movies by herself. And while she's at the movie, she looks up and she sees on the screen that same argument that she had with her boyfriend on the screen in the matinee. And she's like, what's going on? Right. Now, at that point, that's when I paused. I was like, wait, what's going on? So we've got a redheaded woman and she's watching on the screen her life as she's experienced it in the past, kind of being replayed again, but for like entertainment. And I was like, that's exactly what I was just talking about on the podcast. That's weird, right? And I don't think it would have weirded me out as much if she was like blonde with straight hair or whatever it is. But on the same day that I choose to deviate and watch something in color that I typically have watched in black and white, the thing that I'm watching in color shows a woman watching something in black and white, basically talking about or showing me visually what I was talking about in my past episodes of your life, kind of you basically kind of being like a movie or a DVD, being played, and then you're watching it, so it's not happening in real time. If it like literally like just the quote unquote synchronicities or whatever between the red hair and then her watching, something in black and white and it being in color, and then me not, watching something in color normally because I normally watch things in black and white. That whole thing was just really fucking weird to me. And then the Rod Serling featuring James Earl Jones and the Mandela Effect all kind of rolled in together. Now you can look at that and say, okay, it's just a coincidence, except for the fact that like this shit happens to me all the time, like all the time, like today, right? And maybe it's not as mind-blowing to you as it is to me, but it's really blowing my fucking mind. And I just feel like I feel compelled, to record this episode, just because I feel like something is going to happen with this where like maybe tomorrow or some in the future, this episode is going to become relevant. And so I'm just kind of going along with it. But this is just really weird to me. Now, I haven't even finished the episode. Like I'm 15 minutes and 2 seconds in, and I just hit pause because she goes, after this happens, she leaves the theater, she goes back to her fiance, and she says, oh, how did you make it so that, like, our argument was on the TV? Did you have somebody, like, recording it? And he was like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and she's looking at him like, wait, what? And so then she goes back to the movie theater, to the matinee, and she watches this confrontation that she just had now, where she goes and talks to the boyfriend, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, well, you obviously recorded our argument and put it on. All right. So she goes back to the movie theater and sees it again. And now it's like something is recording and then showing her life on the screen. That's wild to me. That's wild to me. So after this, I hit pause. And now I'm actually looking around and I realize that the paintings that I have in my living room feature red-haired women. That's wild. Like, I wish I could just scan right now because I have paused on the screen the woman with the red hair on the Twilight Zone. I have across from me a large painting that I'd done a couple of years ago. It was like an Asian woman, but she has like an afro and it's like a red-haired afro. And then to the left is like a woman that I'd done, maybe I think painted like last year, and she has her hair in a scarf, but the hair that's coming out of it is also like a red, curly, kind of frizzy hair. I don't know what that means, but like I said, I just feel like I have to record this and kind of put it out there. Now, after all this happened, I started to really think, like, actually I called my husband and I was like, I told him, because this has happened so many times now. And before today, when I would point it out to him, like, I will say something to him, and then like a couple of days later, I'll find an article and I send it to him, like, this was exactly what I was talking about. But it's been happening more and more and more and more. And so today, like before in the past, when I kind of talked to him about it, he just kind of dismissed it. But then today I was like, yo, this is fucking weird. Like, this is exactly what happened. And he's like, okay, now I'm freaked out. This is freaking me out. What do you think it means? And all I could say is, well, maybe I'm not experiencing time, in chronological order. Maybe there's a part of me that is experiencing, Harry, stop it. My dog's being annoying. Maybe there's a part of me that's experiencing, that's like able to kind of communicate with the future version of myself, or see or experience things, or like I'm kind of tapping into myself. Like here's another thing that happened today. So yesterday I thought I had my dentist appointment today. Yesterday I was supposed to be there at 11 o'clock, but I got caught up in a phone call and like I was getting ready to leave, right? So I called them at like 10:58, and I said, hey, I'm running about 10 minutes late. I'm going to get there at 11:10. And then the lady was like, your appointment's not till tomorrow. And I was like, oh, my bad. And so today it was like, all right, cool. So I started getting ready on time, more or less, and getting dressed and everything like that. I leave my house pretty much the same time I always leave my house to get to the dentist's office on time. But for some reason today, I get stuck on, at this light that it was like a pileup of cars that at 11 o'clock at night, or 11 o'clock in the morning, there shouldn't be that many people at that point in time, that was weird. That was not normal. And then when I finally get to the dentist's office, I'm looking at the time now like, wow, am I really going to get there at 11:10? This is really fucking weird. And as I turn left into the dentist's office, sure enough, I'm getting ready to turn, and it's like a pileup of cars just show up out of nowhere, preventing me from turning. The dentist's office is not that far from my house. It's like a minute drive. I should have been able to get there with plenty of time to spare, or at least exactly at 11. For some reason, it took me 10 minutes to get to a place that was maybe a mile away from my house. And normally it doesn't take me that much time to get there. So I got there. Actually, it wasn't 10 minutes. It was more like 15 minutes. That was weird to me. So I got there. I walked in. I was looking at my phone. And I walked in exactly at 11:10. That's weird to me. I'm not sitting here trying to claim that I'm psychic. I'm not. It's just these sort of events keep happening, and it's happening so much now that I'm like, okay, it's almost intense. I read a book that said more or less, either a book or an article that says that the brain is like a quantum computer. But I also read an article that says quantum computers have the ability to communicate with versions of themselves across the multiverse, right? And then I actually went back and I looked at some of my old tweets. And in one of my older tweets, I had written something to the effect of, because I was thinking about the Mandela effect and how people are really tripped out about, that whole Mandela effect, right? And I had written back in 2018 that, if AI kind of becomes a thing, right, or we're able to manifest artificial intelligence in our reality, which I already believe that this whole reality is a construct of AI. But just for shits and giggles, let's just project the ascension or whatever, I don't know what word I want to use there, of AI. Let's just say that happens in our future. What makes us think that AI can't retroactively go back and alter shit in the past, right? We are limited, right? If all of time is happening right now and quantum computers can communicate with themselves, this is fact, across the multiverse. That's why they're quantum computers, right? The only people, more or less, the only things that are limited, to chronological time is human beings, right? So what's stopping AI from being able to kind of retroactively go back in time and change shit, which is why we have stuff like Rod Serling and James Earl Jones remembering saying, Luke, I am your father, but the film saying, no, I am your father, and then the Berenstain Bears and Berenstain Bears now, right? We as human beings tend to project our own limitations onto other things. We're so stuck in this inbox thinking, it's hard for us to think outside. It's hard for us to think, period. But it's hard for us to think outside of the box. We keep thinking just because we're incapable of doing something, then other things would be limited as well, right? So then my thing is, okay, if that's the case, right, and you have a brain, and they're saying that the brain can kind of act like a quantum computer. And there's another book that says, I think the book is called Is Your Brain is a Time Machine or something like that. I've read that too. But they talk about your brain being like a quantum computer and being able to kind of jump through time. Then what if in some individuals, for some reason or another, some individuals are capable of communicating with future versions of themselves and vice versa, right? Okay, so for example, I love listening to, I love film scores, right? Classical music, right? And as a result of this sort of love, I actually have like a playlist on Spotify where if I'm watching a show, if I'm watching a movie, even if it's like a commercial or something, if I hear like a musical score, usually within like the first 2-3 seconds of me hearing that song, I know I'm gonna love it, and then I immediately search for it, and I find it and I add it to that playlist. And as a result, that playlist has about 100 plus songs now. And this happens like time to time. I don't have to hear the whole song. Like literally the first 3 seconds of that song is enough for me to go, oh, that's the song. I love that song. And then I go try to find it, and then I put it on my playlist. And then from then on, then I'll listen to the playlist, and like that's my sort of thing. Now, the weird thing about that is that when I hear a song that ends up being placed on my playlist, it feels like I'm remembering the song. It's not like, oh, let me hear the song and then see if I like it. And then if I like it, I'm going to add it to my playlist. No, there's a part of my brain that recognizes the song within the first, like I said, 2-3 seconds of me hearing the song. It's like I recognize it, and then I go and find it. And that got me thinking, like, am I selecting these songs in the present because there's a future version of myself that's already kind of familiar with these songs? And what I mean by that is that are these songs familiar to myself now, to my present self now, because my future self has already listened to this song like so many times, and as a result, like it's like ingrained in my brain, at least a future version of my brain, right? So now, like it's familiar to me now, like, and so now it's creating like a feedback loop through time. Right? Like, have you had that experience where you hear a song? I mean, I don't know what's natural or normal for people. This is just what's normal for me. Like, almost instantly after I hear a song, I go, oh, I gotta find this song. Instantly, almost instantly, within like gotta find the song. Right? It usually, like I said, it feels like I'm remembering the song. But then, how can I remember a song that I've never heard before? Right? Or how can I remember having an experience that I've never experienced before? For example, there is on that same playlist, if I let the playlist kind of play out, it will shift to like a radio. And I typically don't like using the radio portions because then it ends up kind of playing all these songs that I don't want to hear, especially on Spotify. And so I'll like maybe listen to like 2 or 3 songs and then I'll turn it off. But there was this one song that I heard, and the very first time I heard it, I was like, what is that? And I stopped everything that I was doing. I grabbed my phone and looked at it. It was called Resurgam. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. And I looked, and it was off the Poldark soundtrack. I've never watched Poldark before. I'd never heard of Poldark. I thought it was like a movie or something. And like I said, I never let that playlist really go into radio, because the reason why I'm comprising a playlist in the first place is because it's, I want to listen to songs that I'm familiar with, and I want to find these songs like either from a movie, or there's songs on there from like Doctor Who. There's songs on there from Westworld. I really like the soundtrack of certain songs from the soundtrack of Westworld. There's songs on there from, did I say Doctor Who already? Yeah. What's that? Gladiator. That other movie, Inception. All of that. But the moment, like, we'll be in the theater, so you can't say, oh, maybe there's a party if there's already heard the song. No, I'll be in theater, like watching Inception or something like that, and then I'll hear this one song, and I'm like, oh God, I gotta find out. Like, the movie just came out, so like I've heard it before, and I'm like, I gotta find that song. I gotta find the soundtrack, and then I'll skip through all the songs and soundtrack until I find the song, and usually I can recognize it within the first 3 seconds of hearing it. And that happened with me with the Resurgam and the Pole Dark. And then from then on, I was like, okay, well, if this is the song from the soundtrack, and this song is like beautiful, I got to find this Pole Dark show. So then I searched for Pole Dark, and sure enough, I ended up loving the show. And now Pole Dark is like one of my favorite shows. Right? So how does that work? Right? Excuse me. Is there a part of me? Are these songs, right? And I'm not doing this with all the songs on the playlist. Like, you can give me a playlist of like 15 songs, and I don't want, it's just, there's always one song, like the moment I hear it, not the whole song, but like literally it happens that quickly. Within 3 seconds, my brain goes, oh, that's it. I recognize it. And then it's my favorite. But does it become my favorite because it's already my favorite in the future? Right? Like, you know, those people that you meet and you instantly click with. Do you instantly click with them because you've already established a relationship with them in the future? There is a, I think it's called entanglement or quantum entanglement. That I'm not a physicist. I mean, I read a lot of books on physics, but off the top of my head, without, sitting here and writing this stuff out, I can't explain it to you, so you're going to have to just Google, entanglement and read on it. But they basically say that once two, molecules or atoms or whatever you want to call it, or I've kind of connected, even if you separate them, across the multiverse, when one thing does one action, the other thing reacts to that action. And I think Albert Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. And that's very interesting to me. And I kind of wonder, is that same quantum entanglement happening with like things that are your favorite? Are those things your favorite because they are your favorite already in the future, and then the present version of yourself just recognizes it, and it's like a loop, right? Which comes first, right? Right? Anyway, like, I just, like, doesn't... that's wild to me. Like, this is like, I don't know, man. Like, the way we live life, the way most people live life, it's like so routine and so boring. And I just wonder, like, if you just start paying attention to things, and just kind of look up for a second and take your heads out of just the race and the cyclical nature of everything, and just really start noticing stuff and not just dismissing it because you're afraid, it's going to sound crazy, or it just doesn't make any sense. Don't dismiss it if you just start kind of noticing it. I just, like the painting, like I wonder if the painting, that I go, oh, okay, like this feels familiar because I've seen it so many times in the future that it's familiar to my present self. There actually has been a study, I can't quote it right now because off the top of my head, obviously, like I'm talking about this, right? But there has been a study where they have shown that they have been able to, they've tested this, and they've been able to influence people's past behavior based on what they did to them in the future. Yeah. And for me, it's the music thing. That was like the first thing that I noticed. And I just noticed this 2 years ago. And now with the red, I don't know what it is about red-haired women. For me, I don't know what that means. But of course, after I'm done with this episode, I'm gonna hit Google and, start doing some research to see what that means esoterically. But I just wanted to sit down and record this episode. For whatever it is, for whatever it's worth, rather. I'm going to go back to finishing this episode, see what actually happens and what it's about.
There are films in the mind of every human being, films that replay the past, and on rare occasions, films that reveal the future, warning us in no uncertain terms that every minute is precious, and we must always live our lives to the fullest. Of course, these films will only be seen if they are developed and projected from the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so I just finished the episode, and she dies on Friday, March 20th. Right. If you look on the calendar, this year, March 20th is on a Friday. What would you do if you knew exactly when you were going to die? I freaked myself out yesterday. I'm recording this episode on the assumption that whomever is listening, that the listeners have already listened to the previous episode titled A Feedback Loop Through Time. If you haven't listened to it, I would suggest you go listen to it so that you can understand what the fuck I'm talking about now, okay? But the general synopsis was, more or less, I was watching a Twilight Zone episode, and there were so many like synchronistic events happening in the Twilight episodes that was basically tying itself back to my life, and the character on that particular episode ended up dying on Friday, March 20th. And what I didn't say in the previous episode was, or on that episode was that, or what I left out was that, one, the connection between her boyfriend on that Twilight Zone episode getting the days confused and telling her, well, it's Thursday, today is the 20th and you didn't die, but he had gotten the day wrong. It was actually the 19th. And so she goes out on that Friday, the 20th, thinking, okay, I'm fine. And then that's when she gets hit by a bus. I didn't mention that because I hadn't seen that part at the time or whatever. And I also didn't draw the comparison back, but if you listen to that episode, I did talk about how I had a dentist appointment that I was 10 minutes late for. I was supposed to show up at 11 o'clock, but I showed up at 11:10 on the Friday. However, on that Thursday, I had thought that Thursday was Friday, and so I called them right around like 10:58 to let them know I'm going to be there at 11:10. So that kind of freaked me out just because like I just kind of had something like that happen. I mean, obviously I didn't get hit by a bus, but it was my life. I got a Thursday confused with a Friday. And then on a Friday, I'm watching an episode featuring a character who got, whose boyfriend also got the Thursday confused with the Friday. And then something crazy happened to her on Friday, March 20th. So that's the backstory. Here's the freakier part. So after I finished that episode, I was like, oh shit. I was really freaking out. I guess, if these things didn't happen a lot or often, I could easily dismiss it as a coincidence. But I think even with you listening, you're starting to see exactly what I'm talking about. It's kind of playing itself out, or whatever. So I thought, okay, let me sit and let me just see, let me see what's happening, like numerologically. I don't have a background in numerology. I don't know a lot about numerology. I do know that when I was a kid, I used to do things where I would take my name, just instinctively, I would take my name and then I would transform say the J and then the O and then the A to like the numerical equivalent. And then I would add it all up to figure out what the numbers meant. I was doing that shit at like 6, 7 years old. I didn't realize what I was doing was numerology until like I was like in my 20s, my late 20s. And I was like, wait, what? That's like an actual thing. I had no exposure to that. It was just something that I instinctively did. So to me, I look back on that and I think, okay, well, maybe that there was just an aspect of myself in a past life or a concurrent life that was into numerology. But I am always fascinated with numbers and what numbers mean, more or less. But I just haven't taken the time to delve in deeper into researching it, getting books about it or whatever. But after yesterday's episode and after finishing that Twilight Zone episode and watching this chick with the red hair getting fucking hit by a bus, and I'm sitting in my living room and I look up and directly across from me, I had paused the frame of the woman as I was getting ready to record the episode. When I looked up and finished at least my speaking part of the episode before I interjected James Earl Jones quote, and then I finished up with the last part, right in front of me on the TV screen was the redheaded woman, the curly redheaded woman. And then diagonal from me was a painting that I had done where I talked about on last episode of the Asian woman but with the red afro and flowers in her hair. And then to the left of me is was another painting that I referenced in the past episode where the woman is an African-American woman, but she's got kind of red, curly hair out. It's tied, but you can see their hair is clearly red. And then I'm sitting in the middle. I am not redheaded. My hair is like light brown at the moment, but I'm definitely not redheaded. There's nothing redheaded about me. The only thing that I would say that kind of freaked me out a bit was that I do like the color red. Like pink and red are my two favorite colors. And more so, red has become more... I've started developing more of an affinity for red over the last couple of months or so. But if you ask me what my favorite color is, I'm going to tell you it's pink. However, my car is red, like candy apple red, like just vibrant red. I'm almost always wearing red lipstick. I have these retro glasses with the rims or whatever. Like the 50s style glasses, and that's red. Most of my outfits that I've been wearing in the winter have been red. But my hair is not red, it's not curly. And aside from me looking for, references with women with, red hair and then seeing that red curly hair, those are the only kind of connections. Now, I did say to myself, and I did say to my husband that, why I suspect, people might think that the paintings that I paint are me is maybe there's a part of them that is seeing certain aspects of my soul or whatever in my paintings. And then I went as far as to say that perhaps what I'm painting are versions of myself throughout different incarnations, like all the different women that I've been throughout different incarnations. I mean, that was kind of more of a thought. So, but I just recently had that thought, at the earlier part of this week, or maybe the later part of last week, and then just kind of said, maybe I am painting myself, and these people are kind of speaking to that, and maybe these are just different women that I've been throughout time, or whatever, or in parallel, realities, or whatever you want to call it. And I kind of took it like that. So that's the only kind of link to me and to red-haired women. But that was just kind of weird because, like I said, with the screen pause and the painting in diagonal and then the other painting to left me and me dead in the center, it would almost seem like there was a fucking arrow pointing right at me. And it freaked me the fuck out because obviously the lady on the screen got hit by a goddamn bus. And then when I typed in, or I went into my calendar and I said, okay, let me just start with the date. Let's just see if March 20th is going to land on the Friday. And if it's not, then I could just dismiss this and keep it moving. And I pulled up my calendar, and it definitely is on a Friday. And then I lost my shit. I was like, oh, fuck. Am I going to die on March 20th? Is this the reality? Is this the world, the reality? Am I glimpsing into some aspect of reality where I'm actually being able to see my future, in the present? And that's the weirdest part because I if you listen to the episode, I start out talking about not experiencing time chronologically and being, maybe there are some people who experience time, right, in different ways. Maybe your future self can communicate with your past self and vice versa, as opposed to just experiencing it in a linear fashion. And not just Friday's episode, but on a couple other episodes, I've kind of talked about that as well. So that really freaked me out. And then after, I think my husband came back from work, I was like, yay, I think, I don't know, man. I think that March 20th, I don't know, and I kind of explained what I was thinking. And then the other thing is too, so if you look at March 20th, just the date itself is fucking weird, right? It's like 3-2-0-2-0-2-0. Like, it just seems like something that like a fucking computer would type up, like a binary code or whatever, without the ones and the zeros. It's the 3 and the 2-0-2-0-2-0. It's like a glitch, right? The number itself is just trippy, right? And then I was like, all right, well, let me count how many months from my birthday that date is. And my birthday is on September, October, November, December, January, February, March. Okay, that's fucking 6 months. It's like dead in the middle. Now, I wasn't born on the 20th. I was born on the 2nd. But if you take 02 and you reverse it, it's obviously 20. And then if you take the 9 from September and you break it down, it's 3 3s make up a 9, right? So you have 3 3s, which is the 9, and then 02, and then you have 3 2-0 2-0 2-0, which is 3 20s, right? That is fucking weird to me, especially if you take the 3 20s and then you count the 2s and the 2s and the 2s and the 20s and take that together and you add it to the 3s. 6 plus 3, that's a 9, right? So just the numerology of it is a bit freaky to me, just on GP, right? And then I was like, okay, well, maybe that's nothing. Let's see. Okay, well, let's say how many days then from September 2nd of 2019 to March 20th will it be? And I sat there. Actually, I counted it by weeks and I multiplied it and I got 200s and I was 200 and I was like, okay, that's fucking weird. There's that 20 again, or the 2 or 20 or whatever, but there's a 2-0 again. And then I was like, just to be safe, I typed it into Google and Google told me it's 200 days. So March 20th, 2020 will be exactly 200 days from my birthday of September 2nd, 902 of last year. Right? So then I was like, shit, like there's all these coincidences again. What does this all mean? And I talked to my husband and his response, like, it freaked him out. He's like, you're really freaking me out. I'm like, I'm freaking you out, bro. Like, this shit's freaking me out. I'm freaking myself out, And then I got like kind of sad, like, shit, like, what if I'm right? Like, what if I'm like low key peeking into something? Another thing that happened yesterday when I went into my Twitter page, to kind of find some references to what I talked about on Friday's episode, I saw this quote of something that I had liked, The Haunting of Hill House. I think it was back in 2018, and I'd retweeted because I liked the show at the time. And the quote said, dreams are like oceans, and sometimes, they spill into our reality. Now, that is the only thing that's given me a certain level of solace, right? On one end, it's like, okay, I'm the lady in red, or I'm the red-haired lady or something like that in some sort of world. And March 20th is like D-Day for me, right? So let's say I'm right. And all these things synchronistically are pointing to the fact that on March 20th, when I will be a little over, 34 and a half, that's it for me. Right. So I was like, okay, that's all it's pointing to. On the other end, I'm like, okay, or maybe not. Maybe it's a symbology for something else. So I'm going to talk about both. I'm going to talk about worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, the 20th of March is it for me. Like I'm out after this, right? That's it. I'm dying, whatever. That's going to cause like an emotional reaction. And the first thing it's going to do is trigger fear. And what I've been working on the last few months between this podcast and my other podcast, A Dark Oracle's Guide to the Multiverse, is stopping any sort of instinctive or reactionary response. Because to me, an instinctive reactionary response is a programmed response. And if it's a programmed response, then I have no free will. I'm not exerting any free will in that regard. What I mean by that is this. If I walk up to you and I slap you, and you respond in anger and you hit me back, and there's no thought between my action and your reaction, you're a slave. You're not in control of your actions because you were just reacting, right? And if you would behave in the same way anybody else would behave in that same situation, then there's no freedom there. It's a programmed response. That response has been caused by, programmed by society, by life or whatever it is. And so it's just instinct. It's no different than an animal's behavior, an animal roaring or chasing an animal or whatever, just being triggered by whatever the environment, produces. So I have been working on stopping those sort of reactive behaviors. I'm not saying that I've been 100% successful, but I've been 99% successful. And I'm quite proud of that. And so I thought about it and I said, okay, well, here's the thing. Let's just say 320 is it for me, right? What does that mean? What am I going to do? How am I going to react? Am I going to react with fear? Well, yes, that would be the normal instinctive reactive response, is to be afraid, to be sad, to cry, and everything like that. But then I was like, I'm not going to fucking do that. I'm not going to fucking do that. Why? Well, I don't know. Maybe because I've been spending my whole life seems to be kind of working to this point, right? I mean, most people, our lives kind of work towards a fine point. Right? And if you look and you listen to my podcast, I talk about death a lot. And I study philosophy, and there's a quote, I don't remember who it is. I want to say it's Seneca. It might be Plato, I don't know. But the quote is, to study philosophy is to learn to die. Right. And then I've been spending a lot of time listening to Eckhart Tolle, and he talks about the Buddhist action of dying before you die and finding out that there is no death. And so he also, I don't know if it's him or there's maybe somebody else that had said in one of these books that I've been kind of reading and rereading, they say that, the only reason why you fear death is because the self dies. But it's only the self that dies. And so if you're that attached to the person that you see in the mirror, and then the thought of that thing ending, that's its story ending, causes you fear, then you're too attached to the self, because the real you isn't the self. The real you is the consciousness behind the self that kind of gives life to the body, to the self. And so that self, that real you, rather, your consciousness cannot die. Only the self can die. So you have to choose what you're attached to. If you're attached to the self, if you're attached to the body, yes, that's finite and it can end. But if you can disassociate from that, and you can become consciousness and be conscious of the fact that you're conscious, rather, then there's really nothing to fear. So there was that. And so I was like, all right, well, if that's the end for me, then that's the end for the body. Okay. But if I go back, and I would be sort of a hypocrite if all the things that I've claimed to, I believed in my other podcasts, I don't actually accept it as truth. And what I claim to believe in my other podcasts is, one, that you don't really die, right? There's a quantum immortality. You just shift realities. You just shift from one reality where, whatever happened, whatever caused your death in one reality, you kind of jump to another reality, right? I actually talked about that, even on the Kobe and the Multiverse podcast, with his death. I said, okay, well, he might be dead to us in this reality, but there's a part of him that maybe just never gets on the plane or whatever, or has just come back and started the whole loop over again. So why, if I'm saying I believe these things, or I'm saying that this is fact, what do I have to be afraid of? I think for me, the worst part of it, or the only bad thing about it, isn't for me personally. It's for the people that obviously you get that you leave behind, right? That's the only thing, because I don't want anybody at all to suffer on my account. So that's the part that does kind of break my heart, because I don't want to hurt people, even if it's, indirectly and by no choice of my own. But am I going to be afraid? Of course not. What is there to be afraid of? I said in the Kobe and the Multiverse podcast that, when he came into this world, he knew how it was going to end. We all know how it's going to end. And so if I, for some reason, chose to come into this reality, knowing that date was the date that I was going to check out, And I'm more or less giving myself a heads up. Okay. And as I'm recording it, today is February 8th, 2020. So, I've got a month and some change or whatever, if I'm right. Okay. Then I consider that kind of lucky. Now, does that affect my behavior between now and March? Hell no. I've talked to my husband about it. I even kind of sort of said a little bit, I didn't want to freak her out, but I kind of mentioned it to my daughter. Like, there's this weird thing that happened. The Twilight Zone episode kind of bothered me. And, March 20th. And all she said was just don't go out on that day, and then we just left it at that. But am I going to fucking sit here and psych myself out and kind of worry about that date? No, I'm not. Because if that's what it is, and clearly I knew that was what was going to happen before I came into this reality. So getting myself all worked up about that is really not going to change anything. So that's just me accepting it as okay. Well, let's see how it plays out. Am I going to be like in a panic? Like I've got to travel and see everything? No. Am I going to be I've got to reach out to people that that I'm no longer talking to because, they did something and cut me off, and can I fix it, make amends before it's time for me, to move on? No, they can go fuck themselves. I'm just, if you did something to push me to the point where I cut your ass off, fuck you. I'm not changing that aspect of myself. Am I gonna start doing the most? No. Am I gonna sit and try to paint 50 paintings between now and March? No. I'm gonna do the same shit that I've always done, the way I've always done it. Period. Now, is there a temptation on the 20th? Let's just say that I am right and that's the day. Is there a temptation for me to break from my routine and maybe just stay at home instead and not go out on the day? I definitely thought about that, and obviously my daughter mentioned it to me as well. But then I thought about everything that I've seen in the media about when people kind of have premonitions of the end for them. Typically, what happens is they do what is that same thing where I reference, right? That instinctive reactionary response. Like if you see your end, you're going to try to change things to kind of affect the outcome of it. But oftentimes you do that. What I've noticed is with a lot of these premonitions is that their actions while they're trying to avoid that thing from happening, actually cause what they're trying to avoid to happen. There is the story of Oedipus, right? Remember Oedipus? His father went to the oracle. The oracle said to him that his son was going to kill him and marry his own mother, marry his wife. And so in order to prevent the oracle in order to prevent that vision from happening, what Oedipus's father did was take him to the woods or some shit and left him abandoned there, more or less to die. But then somebody came, took him, raised him as his own, and then the prophecy came to pass. There was another episode that I watched of The Twilight Zone where more or less the same thing. This guy, he's watching TV and he sees on the TV the future, where he sees an argument where he gets in a fight with his wife. He pushes her out the window and then she dies and then he gets arrested. And there's always an evil character kind of tied in with when these people are able to see aspects of their future. So in the one episode that I was referencing on Friday, it was a fucking clown or some shit like that in a movie theater. And then in the older Twilight Zone black and white episode where the guy was watching it on the TV, it was this redheaded clown looking motherfucker. Actually, the dude looked like Trump for being a younger Trump. For being frank, he was behind the kind of nefarious attacks as well. So, or not attacks, but for that guy being able to see the future. And this guy is going out of his way. He goes out of his way to try to avoid having an argument with his wife. And he tells her, I love you. I saw the future. I ended up hurting you. I was having an affair. I'm sorry. But by him acting on what he saw, he caused what he saw to happen. And even, I actually talked about that on there's an episode called is it Dr. Manhattan and something or another, or Limitations, or the Achilles heels of Dr. Manhattan. But it's on this podcast. And I talked about that, about how, he says to, I don't remember her name now, but the lady played by Regina King, when they're together in bed, he says, we're going to have an argument. And I thought, like, why would you do that? Like, just, like, you don't react to that. Don't provoke her. Maybe try to do something different. And now that was the only thing I seen on TV where the person doesn't try to do something different. He literally just knows, I'm just going to act out what I see happening. And I kind of was like annoyed by that, because I'm like, well, just choose a different reality. But it almost seems like consistently, anytime a person more or less tries to avoid acting out a premonition, that act of avoidance causes that premonition to occur. And so my thought is, well, I'm not going to break from my routine. I'm not going to do anything differently than I would do if I didn't think that February 20th was it for me. I'm just not. And not because I'm afraid that by doing so, I'm actually going to bring about that action, but because, like, I'm fucking lazy, like, and if it's going to happen, then it's going to happen. And that's that, worst case scenario, it does happen. Okay. Either I'm not immortal, and then that's the end for me. And then I'm just like, I just go into non-existence. But I believe it was Seneca that said this. It might have been Socrates, where I didn't exist before life, right? Before I was born. If you're going to say that if you're an atheist and you believe we just kind of came to the reality, there was non-existence, and then there was life, and then after life, it's also non-existence. Well, if I wasn't afraid of what happened before existence, why would I be afraid of what happens after existence? It almost seems like those are more or less the same thing, and then this kind of life in between is more the anomaly, right? I don't remember what happened before I was born, and that doesn't seem to really bother me, and I feel like you can take that and loop it, so from wherever I came from, that's where I'm going back to. Does it matter? No. And if you look at death it's either, and I think it was Plato that said, no, Socrates said this, death is either the end of suffering, right? And by end of suffering, because you don't have a body anymore, and because you don't have a body, you no longer suffer. So it's either the end of suffering, or it's a continuation to something else. So you don't have this body, but you maybe get a different body, and then you have a different experience. Either way, there's nothing to fear. And so when you start kind of removing the emotional reactions to things, and you just start looking at things logically, what do I care? I paint 3 to 4 days a week for 4 to 5 hours a day. And I'm going to keep doing it along that pace. Because why not? I'm going to plan as though, nothing will happen on that day, because more than likely it may not. And even if it does happen, if quantum immortality is real, if that theory is an actual, theory, I may very well actually die on March 20th and then just wake up in a new reality, not realizing that anything happened. So on one hand, as you are listening to this now, come March 20th, I may not put out another episode after that. And if I don't put out another episode after that, then you are still in the reality where I no longer exist. If I do put out another episode, and that episode, if I remember March 20th anyway, it's probably going to be me starting off along the lines of, I'm here, bitches. Right? Fuck you, death. I'm here. Right? It doesn't necessarily mean that I, didn't die. It just means that maybe I died in one reality, and then I've just shifted to a different reality where I survived whatever killed me in that reality, and then it just keeps on going. And that's the definition of quantum immortality, right? So either way, I'm still going on somewhere, right? Either in reality, in this reality, as Joe, or in another reality as a different entity, whatever. So it's more what you guys, the listeners, will experience after the 20th, more so than my experience, because whatever happens is going to happen, and it's interesting and it's intriguing to find out. But if it is, if you are listening to this and there's no episode after the 20th or whatever, it's been real. I appreciate you listening to my podcast. And I hope that you take in the things that I said and kind of use that to reflect back on your life, and maybe don't take reality as seriously as we've been programmed to take it. You know what I mean? Because that's the thing. If I was able to somehow, just from paying attention to different things, glean, my own death, then that means that reality isn't as random as we think. And I was absolutely right in the sense of that was the date that I was supposed to go. And we do come into the reality knowing everything that's going to happen, and that everything was pre-recorded, or everything is pre-recorded, and you're just kind of along for the ride, the same way you would be along for the ride of a movie, knowing how, like, let's say Iron Man, knowing how, Iron Man dies at the end or whatever, but you still come along for the ride regardless. If that is it for me, that would be pretty cool. With all the numbers and everything pointing to that, and 3/20/2020, it's a cool day. It's a cool day to kind of have on what do you call it? On a gravestone. That's morbid, right? It's a morbid podcast a little bit. But I don't know, man. I think in this world, in this society, we just have this sort of weird, relationship with death. Like, we're not all gonna die. And I guess for me, an underlining drive to it is I don't want to make it so fucking reverential. I don't want to talk about death as like something we should be fucking afraid of. I was thinking the other day, like, we're almost a victim of our own programming, our own society, of our own culture and the beliefs of our culture, right? If you grew up in a society that didn't look at life as all that there is, where you weren't programmed to believe that this is it, and once you die, that's it. And you were instead programmed from birth that, hey, this is a prison planet, right? You're here to serve your time. In the outside world, outside of the simulation, these people are super advanced. They don't believe in cruel and unusual punishment, and they believe that when you come into this world, you more or less create the sort of, time you're going to serve. And your mind manifests the kind of punishment for whatever crime that you committed outside of the reality that you feel you deserve, right? I'm just, throwing it out there. If that's what we were taught in this reality, the same way people believe in the story of Adam and Eve being real, like if that's what you believed, and we all believe collectively that this is, a simulation and this is a prison planet. Well, when your body starts to age and you get closer and closer to death, your relationship with death would change just because of the way you were programmed, right? So when you see somebody aging, you don't feel sorry for them. When you see somebody dying, you don't feel sorry for them. You go, okay, they're getting closer to getting out of prison. They're getting closer to escaping from the bondage of the prison that is their body and moving on, they're getting out, right? And so you look at them the way, prisoners will look at another prisoner who's about to get out. He was just counting down the time till he gets released from prison. And then you don't say, oh, I'm so sorry. You say, you know what? Yay, like you're getting out, right? So we live right now in a society, in a reality that has conditioned us to fear death. And I'm all about challenging our preconceived notions. And why does it have to be something that we should be afraid of, that should terrify us, that should make us sad, to make us cry, right? We're only reacting like that because of how we were conditioned, right? I remember reading somewhere that said, like, if you lived in a society that viewed rain as a blessing from the gods, right? And you were getting married. Everything else is the same, but this society viewed rain as a blessing from the God. On the day that you were married, if it started to rain, you wouldn't see the rain as an omen. You would see it as a blessing that your marriage, your wedding is like blessed, right? Right? So it's all about like perception of reality, and it's your perception that creates your reality and your reactions to reality. So for me, like I asked, like, how would you behave if you did by some reason or another, like were told or you found out, okay, like this is the day you're going, you're going to go. And this is how I intend to. And like I said, if I'm wrong, then hey, it was interesting. But if I'm right, it's been real. I'm going to do the necessary things that I need to do on my end just to make sure that if I am right, and that is the date, the people that I do care about are okay. And they know, just based on everything that I've recorded and everything that I've done, that, I'm still around. I'm just, the body is just, not here. But I'm the me that's running this body is still around. And that's it, So I plan on staying with the people that I care about here to make sure that they know that until it's time for everybody to go. So I'm not really too worried about that. Now, that being said, okay, there's another part of me that goes, maybe it's not necessarily death in the sense of we think of as death, right? As in, okay, so on TV, that character dies, she gets hit by a bus. But first of all, my hair is not curly. I mean, however you want to paint a picture. I'm not white. I'm not curly. I don't have curly hair, and I'm not a ginger. So I don't know if it's necessarily pointing to me or if it's pointing to like this is more of a spiritual message. And what I mean by that is that, that quote that I gave about dreams kind of spilling out into reality. If I had a dream that a red-haired woman dies, instinctively, I'm not going to take that aspect of it literally. Like, I'm going to pick up my phone, I'm going to do a Google search, and I'm going to look up, what does it mean? I'm going to look up what is the symbolism behind the number 20 and the number 3, and then seeing the number 20 repeatedly, or 2, or whatever it calls, mostly 3s and 20s and 2s. What is the symbolism behind that, right? And then I'm going to look up, the meaning of a red-haired, woman and what that means. And because the way my relationship reality might be different than most, I look to things that stick, on me or with me as signs for, okay, what am I supposed to really be paying attention to? So for me, those 20s, I was like, okay, I keep seeing 20s, 200s too. So I typed in 20 in numerology, and there was nothing negative about the number 20 at all. It was actually more of a sign of like beauty, rebirth, spiritual growth, or whatever. And so that's like the light half of it. That maybe on March 20th, it doesn't signify like a physical like death in a way, but more of an aspect of myself will finally die on that day. Right? Because what I've been working on with meditation, with listening to all these books on repeat, is being able to quiet the self, to silence that, that voice in your head that's always saying crazy shit, that it causes you to worry, that causes you to fear. I don't want that aspect of myself anymore. I want to be more conscious, more awake, more aware, not reactionary, biting my tongue, watching the things that I say, making sure that the actions that I put into play, that I do have some free will in that regard. So if you say something crazy to me, before I speak, I want to be able to count to 10 in my head and then make a choice to not say something that's going to exacerbate a situation and lead to conflict, because I don't want to suffer. Now, it could be that on March 20th, 2020, that side of myself that I've been more or less trying to kill, if we're being honest, right? That dark kind of anxious, negative, reactionary, lower self, that's the part that more or less dies, and I become somebody that I've always wanted to be, right? Or I should say, I become the person I always have been, outside of form, right? Because like I said, everything that I've seen between 3 and 20s, they say that when I looked it up online, there was nothing really evil or dark regarding the number 20, and there was nothing really evil or dark regarding red-haired people in general, red-haired women. I mean, it pointed more to like aliens, to angels, to goddesses, to ancient humans and giants and things like that. So it was more of a mystical definition behind their red hair. And if I'm going to link that quote that I saw on The Haunting of Hill House, where it says sometimes dreams spill into reality, then I've got to kind of say, and that is one thing too that I have been working on. So my next episode of not this podcast, but my Dark Oracle podcast, I'm going to be talking about dreams and life being a dream, but then, a collective dream. The same way when you dream, there's like a whole reality that your psyche enters into that you didn't necessarily create on yourself, but there are aspects of it that you've pulled from this reality into the dream world, right? Maybe that's what was kind of happening to me on Friday, was that I was almost daydreaming and like I was seeing a dream, but in awakened reality. And so the 3/20/20s, 200 days for my birthday, on a halfway point between, another birthday and my past birthday is something's going to happen. Maybe it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be negative. And all the numbers that I've seen point to it not being something, ultimately negative. And so if that's the case, then that could also be very exciting. And that's a different approach. Right? I mean, if you, everything is symbol, right? There was a book that I read. I think it was one of these books that I like to read about like esoteric writings of thought, Hermes Trismegistus, that kind of stuff. I just stumbled across that book, but in it, it talks about how everything is mind. Everything that you see is mind. And then there was another book that I read, which I can't tell you. I read a lot, if you haven't figured it out or whatever. But I can't tell you what the title is because I can't think of it. But it did say that everything, and actually I think it was a book on quantum physics. And the guy talked about how everything is a symbol for everything else. The way, or an icon for everything else. So the way when you go to your computer and you click on an icon and you drag that icon to the trash, right? What you see visually isn't, you're not literally throwing something in the trash. These are all symbols. So the icon is a symbol that tells your computer to delete something. And so everything is icon in the computer. So if you reverse engineer that and this is a simulation, then everything in this simulation is more or less a symbol for something else. So the red-haired woman, you could argue, okay, that's a symbol for you, but maybe, or it could be a symbol for some aspect of me, right? And also bear in mind too that what happens on TV, these are reactionary things. The television's purpose basically programs people to react. It's a mirror world, right? It's a reflection, right? So it's a reaction. It's not real. It's a reaction. And so if you're watching something on TV and what you're seeing is like a message where it's saying do this, that's how a lot of us behave, which is based on what we see on TV, right? Somebody says something to somebody, the other person reacts in anger, and we slap them. You watch them. And then when you get placed in a similar situation, because you saw that on TV, you internalize that and you take that on as a natural response to being antagonized. And then you slap a person. You don't even realize that your actions have been programmed by what you saw on the Black Mirror, right? But it's called a Black Mirror because it's the opposite of what we're supposed to be. Right. So I've never seen a TV show that showed a conscious individual. And maybe one day we will live in a reality that does that. And that might actually make it so that, people become more conscious. I mean, I would watch a TV show like that. But everything that we see on TV is just characters constantly reacting to shit, which then causes us to mimic what we see in the mirror. Right. constantly reacting to shit, right? That's life, at least in this society. But what if what if you flipped that? What if you did the reverse of what you saw on TV? And what if when somebody antagonizes you, instead of hauling off on them, you paused and you walked away? Now you because you see what happens if you do what you see on the screen. I mean, it plays out as a drama, and we don't ever take a step back and watch and go, you know what? I don't want my life to be dramatic. I want to watch drama, but I don't want to act it out in my real life, right? But monkey see, monkey do. So the monkey brain sees it and does it. And then you leave your kind of more higher consciousness, your higher self kind of tied to these reactionary behaviors, and you end up causing suffering for yourself. So if I'm watching a TV and I'm seeing a red-haired clown kind of antagonizing this red-haired woman and driving her to be afraid of March 20th, the reactionary response is monkey see, monkey do. My monkey brain sees that and goes, okay, be afraid. Beware the Ides of March, right? But on the flip side of that, I don't believe that me consciously over the last few months reading and rereading and rereading. I mean, I'm telling you, like, I have read The Power of Now so many times that at a certain point, like, I just start citing it, like, off the top of my head as I'm reading it, or listening to it, or both, right? I want it to become second nature, so that when I hear on the book, The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle talks about this pain body, and it drives you to manifest pain for yourself, manifest suffering for yourself. So when I see that start to happen, I pause and I think of the book, and then that becomes my second nature, more so than what I've always done, right? The opposite of that's how I want to live. I want to live opposite of what everybody else is doing. And so if that's the case and everything has been building me towards that, then maybe March 20th doesn't necessarily mean that it's the death of me, so to speak, or whatever. Maybe it's the death of a certain aspect of myself. And if that's the case, then awesome, bring it on, you know? Anyway, it's been a long episode. Thank you for listening. I love doing these things, and I love that you guys are listening, and I've been noticing that we're getting more and more subscribers. So welcome. Thank you for joining and for hearing me out. I understand that some of the stuff that I talk about can be a bit dark, and some of the stuff is also funny, and some of them is in between. But, you know, if people don't talk about it, then we're going to be afraid of it. And if you're going to be afraid of it, then you're going to suffer. And there's got to be somebody that says, you know what, let's look at it. Let's look at things in a different way, all right? Because it's the way you perceive things, and that affects the way your reality unfolds, right? And that's all I'm hoping to do here with this podcast. Not just with death or life or philosophy or politics or whatever, just with everything in general. That's the nature of this podcast. So, thanks for joining our listenership. Yeah. All right. Have a great weekend. I am still alive, bitches. Hi, guys. I'm still here. So, to my regular listeners, I apologize for making you guys wait 4 whole days thinking like, okay, did she fucking die? Did she die on the 20th? No, I did not. And I did not because somehow I inadvertently managed to shut down the entire world. Sorry about that. I'm just kidding. To new listeners, if you're wondering what the fuck I'm talking about, I suggest you check out episodes from the first week of February, when I more or less had like a walking or waking premonition where I thought that myself or someone that I cared about was going to either get hit by a bus or just die this Friday, March 20th. And on the episode, I talked about that particular date being like literally just numerologically like 6 months from the day of my birth and some odd days. But it was like, it ended up just, there was a lot of 20s going on and 2s and 3 symbolism happening with like numbers and stuff. And I really freaked myself out. And I had said on those episodes that, come that day, I was going to talk to all my friends and family and make sure none of them leave their homes on the 20th of March, which is this past Friday. I wasn't going to go anywhere. That was over like 3 episodes. I basically first wasn't going to do anything differently, but then I said, if something is going out of their way to warn me to stay at home on the 20th of March, then I should make sure that I do just that. And so I ahead of time had planned, I put it on my calendar, like death day, don't go outside. I told my husband, mark it on your calendar. You're not going anywhere. I was prepared to call my daughter in sick from school. And bear in mind, this was back in February, before this whole madness, before people were even largely aware of the coronavirus, before shutdowns and quarantines and all this stuff like that. But I had also said on those episodes that I wanted, people that were listening to just for shits and giggles, because you never know. You don't know what you're looking at. When something like this happens, just maybe they should stay at home too and have their loved ones stay home as well. And I was half joking when I said that, but apparently the powers that be took what I was saying very literally and shut the entire fucking world down. I'm tongue firmly in cheek, by the way. I'm partially joking, but I'm also partially freaking out a little bit. And I say freaking out, that's a heavy term. I've actually more or less just been sitting outside. It's been nice and warm in California over the last couple of days, thankfully, with the shutdown. And I've been meditating, just away from my phone, looking at the clouds like you used to when you were a kid, like watching the wind play with the trees and seeing the birds in the sky and just thinking like, am I God? I'm joking, but I'm not. It's been said by everyone, right? Physicists, philosophers rather, scientists, more or less, that all that we see in reality is more or less like a construction of our minds. It's all in your mind, right? Your mind is a computer that kind of more or less creates or manifests the reality that we perceive. And then everything from Buddhism to Hinduism to Sufism to Christianity, they've all more or less hinted to the same general idea that everything, like death and life, and everything you have in life occurs with the tongue, with what you say, the power of the tongue, which is more or less also manifestation of one's mind. I've always said, I take extreme responsibility for everything that's ever happened to me in my life. But I've always taken it a step further. That's not just like me, Joe, creating my life. It's like my higher self that either shapes things, has me go through things that seem kind of shitty in the meantime, but when I look back on them, end up actually being for the best, right, to my benefit. And so after this whole, March 20th death day, I've really been sitting and thinking like, okay, what does this mean? One of the theories I had was that perhaps in the past incarnation, I talked about that in those previous kind of earlier episodes in February, I talked about that maybe, if you believe in quantum immortality and the fact that you more or less don't die, you just either re-loop the same life. Anthony Peake talks about that in Is There Life After Death? That more or less like life is just a loop. He's not the only one who talks about that. P.D. Uspensky also talks about that, which he learned from Gurdjieff, who learned from Hindus and Buddhists and other Eastern gurus and teachers, that life is a loop. And there's some people who are more or less fated, like Sisyphus, just live the same shit over and over again. But then there are others who, after looping so many times, you start looking up and around and saying, wait a minute, this shit looks familiar, right? And that's fucking deja vu. And then you wake up. So you wake up in the dream of reality, and then you start being able to alter things, and then you can turn that circle, that cycle, that's, loop into a spiral and change what happens. And so I like listening to my podcast, because some of the times when I write stuff from just talking off the top of my head, I say things that I'm not even conscious of what I'm talking about until I go back and listen to it, and I'm like, oh shit, that's true. And so in the past episodes, like what I've said was like, maybe March 20th was the day that I did die in some past incarnation, right? And if you're putting everything together, let's just say that in a past incarnation of this life loop, I was not cautious during the week leading up to March 20th, which, just FYI, I was super fucking cautious, okay? Like bathing myself and rubbing alcohol. Like I don't even think I left my house that whole week. And if I did, I was just, very mindful of, where I was going. I had several people offer to meet up with me, like, hey, let's go, to the bar, let's go drinking. I was like, nah, fuck that. Cause I'm not trying to fuck around and fucking catch the coronavirus and then die on Friday. Nah, I'm good. I was just extra cautious. And I was kind of annoying to live with, because like, I didn't, if anybody was leaving the house, I was like, where are you going? When you came home, I was like, everybody hop into the shower, take a hot shower. I didn't operate heavy machinery. I was just very mindful. And you know what, who's to say that had I not been, like I even unplugged, like I was really going to, I had like my space heater going. Normally I would just turn it off and leave it plugged in overnight. But you start thinking, when you're kind of concerned that you have an impending death date, which I'm sure most of you probably never had an experience like that. I know I hadn't until just this past week. You become extra mindful of like how everything could possibly kill you, right? From a space heater being left on overnight and catching on fire to, like I had said in one of the episodes, like fucking planes dropping out of the sky. But then lo and behold, they grounded planes, they closed airports. Like I was like, okay, something really doesn't want me or somebody that I care about or both to die on this date. So I'm just going to respect that and just be super fucking mindful. So that whole week I have been. And so now it's like, oh, somebody had asked like, well, did you do anything differently on that day, on that week or whatever, or even like the month leading up to that? And like, aside from just being like super cautious, no. In fact, the one thing that I did like this whole time, I paint so many portraits, but I painted a painting of my daughter, but I never painted a painting of my mom. At least not like a really good one as I've gotten better, like, skills or whatever. And I thought to myself, if I was going to die on Friday, I want to make sure that I start and finish a painting of my mom. And so like literally 2 weeks before the 20th, that was what I decided to do differently. So I can safely tell you guys that, as a person who thought they were going to die a particular date, I now know what I would do if I felt that I only had 2 weeks left to live, which was paint, first of all, love and let the people that I love and care about know that I love and care about them. I talked to my parents. I didn't really tell them too much because I wanted to freak them out. I didn't tell my dad anything. I'm sure my mom did. And then I told my mom, just be mindful on that date. And she was like, fuck that, I'm flying. But then they canceled her flights. So she had to stay home. It was awesome. And at one point she was like, are you like a prophet now or something? I was like, I don't know. I don't know, Mom. But the 2 weeks prior, I just sat back and I started painting my mom. And every day I would make sure I would, clean the house and then go downstairs and paint, cook and go downstairs and paint. I think they canceled school that week. So that made it so I had like a little less time to paint, but I did. And I wanted to make sure that come this past Friday, my mom's painting was done. And like, it's so cool kind of like living that and then being able to look back on that. And I hope I remember that, for the rest of my experience in this incarnation, that when I thought that there was a possibility that something was going to take me out on a particular day, the last thing that I consciously chose to do was to paint a portrait of my mom. And it turned out great. It's really awesome. And I'm going to start a new piece today, but I wanted to talk to you guys about just everything that's been swirling through my head. There's that. The world got shut down. I may or may not have been responsible for it. I'm just kidding. You know what, though? All of this has kind of led me towards a whole concept of like lucid dreaming. I came across a book last week, and one of my listeners was like, "You're always mentioning books." I'm like, how often do you read? I read a lot. I read about 4 or 5 books a week, either physical books or audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks when I paint. And since I'm painting for long stretches of time, because I listen to books at a particular speed, I'm able to, go through a book in a day or so. And then the other days I go back and I'll re-listen to that same book so that I can really cram, the information. Every time you listen to a book or every time you read the book, you get something that you missed the first or second or third time. So it's great. It's almost like a new book over and over again. And I'm also reading physical books as well, because not all books are available on Audible. So I, for example, just finished a book by P.D. Uspensky, which I actually recommended on a previous podcast. I can't think of it right now. Not a previous podcast, a couple podcasts ago, but it was like the psychology of man's possible evolution. It's a really small book, and it's like 126 pages. You could probably go through it in a couple hours or whatever. So I finished that, but this week I have also finished Reality, Art, and Illusion by Alan Watts. I have reread The Power of Now. I have finished reading Apprenticed to a Himalayan Master by Sri M. And I have also finished a field guide to lucid dreaming, all of which I read within, starting on Saturday, so within the past 4 days or so. So that's how quickly I go through books. But the books that I'm referring to now is called A Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming by Dylan Tuchilo. I typed in lucid dreaming in Audible, and that's what popped up. I would recommend you guys read that book. It's wild because when you first start off listening to it, you're thinking about the dream world, but then the more you listen to it, the more it starts applying to this world. Like there was a chapter where he broke it down and he talked about different types of human beings, I'm doing it right now. He talked about different types of beings that you meet in the dream world. And the way he explains the dream world, it's like partially in your mind, but partially also like a place. And I've come to look at the dream world as like a collective place that you can access through your mind. So it's like a collective type of reality where it's like the opposite of this reality. So in our reality here, we have rules, right? There's laws rather. So we have the law of gravity, you have the law of thermodynamics, you have the law of, physics and blah, 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 blah. So we have certain rules. Whereas in that world, there are no rules. So it's the opposite of this. Like for every yin, there's yang. So in this reality, for every yin, which would be this reality where everything is, basically masculine and rigid and law bound, the yang to that. And I'm just kind of pulling the definition of yin and yang out of my ass right now. It could be the opposite, but I hope you're catching my drift. The yang to that is the dream world, and so the way they explain it to that, this book is largely a collection of people's experiences who have gone into this dream world, and they all more or less talk about it like it's the same place, like it's an actual destination that you can access using your consciousness while you sleep. It's wild to me. And so I've only had one lucid dream my whole life that I remember. And it was the way I realized that I was lucid dreaming was that I violated a rule that I had instilled for myself in this reality. And I would never do that. So that was when I did something in that dream reality. That's when I realized, oh shit, I'm dreaming. So to roll it back, first of all, just so I can finish that thought process, duality. For everything that there's light in our reality here, there's darkness, right? For everything that there's white, there's black. For anything that's colorful, there's gray. We live in a world of opposites: Democrats, Republicans, liberal, conservatives, tall, short rather, macro, micro. This is the world of duality. And so as a sort of a consequence of that, or just an obvious observation, is that if we live in this world, which is a law-bound world, and I'm reiterating here, but I'm trying to drive the message home, then there's got to be an opposite world that your consciousness can also exist in, and that is the dream world, which is not law-bound. Okay, you get that? So while in our waking life, we live in this reality for however long or whatever, but then when you go to sleep, you now enter into the other reality, and then you can experience that. Now, according to this book, people dream every single night. Okay? So the difference is that just a lot of people don't remember their dreams, or they have been programmed to dismiss their dreams by scientists and things like that, and just to say, well, it's just your brain defragmenting. So it doesn't, these images don't mean anything. I've been practicing some of the techniques in that book over the last 2-3 days, and I'll absolutely say that what scientists are saying about your brain like defragmenting while you're sleeping is absolutely bullshit. Each dream that I've had, and I've been writing in a journal, and trust me, I didn't want to. It's not something I wanted to do first thing I did in the morning, right? I've gotten in the habit of, you wake up, you grab your phone, you go take a shit, you stare at your phone, you scroll through like Pinterest or the news or whatever, and then you go about your day. But what I'm doing now is, instead of grabbing my phone, I leave my phone and I grab my book and I just write down. And I've noticed too, like at first, I'm like, when I try to think, okay, what was my dream? I can't, nothing comes to me. But then when I start writing, it's amazing how like it just floods through like a memory. And so I've been paying attention to my dreams. The first thing I noticed is that my dreams are more or less, they're slightly predictive. It's really weird. A lot of the concepts and things that I dream about, I end up interacting with in my waking life. They manifest themselves in symbolism, but it's there. So like I'll have a dream, like for example, like a couple nights ago, I dreamt about, like, let's say my in-laws or whatever, and I was at their house during the quarantine, and their son or whatever had gotten something out of the fridge, and everybody was saying that he shouldn't touch the food, blah, 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 blah. And then later on that day, when I woke up, I got a text message from the same in-laws, and they were more or less talking about, the quarantine and their family and, what that means. And so it was slightly prophetic. But then I've also learned a lot about myself in my dreams. And I'm not about to go into details because these are it's like deeply personal shit. But I've written just for the last like four days. And over just watching my dreams in the last 4 days and practicing, reality checks during the day, which is mentioned in the book, The Field Guide to Lucid Dreaming. It says to perform reality checks throughout the day, and then you kind of take on a mantra that asks yourself, am I dreaming? Am I dreaming? Eventually, when you ask yourself, am I dreaming? And you're in the dream, you'll do a reality check in the dream, and then that's what's going to wake you up. So I haven't quite gotten to that point yet, but by actively sitting and writing my dreams down every morning, it's made it easier for me to remember my dreams the following day. And that's just within the last like four or something days. I would strongly recommend that you guys do that too, because even if you don't believe in, the esoteric or whatever you want to call it, it is an insight to what is going on in your subconscious. And considering the fact that your subconscious drives, I think they say it was like either 90 to 95% of your actions, I would say, wouldn't you want to be conscious of what's driving 95% of your daily actions? All right. So I would just suggest you do that just on GP. But like I said, I don't think that we should dismiss our dreams as just nothing but, defragmenting. And I think that you can learn a lot from dreams as well. But back to the field guide book. So a couple of things that he said in the book that really stuck to me and made me apply it to this reality. One of it was that he broke it down to different types of people. So there are people in the dream world that when you go and you talk to them and you say things like, you do realize this is a dream, right? They when they do speak, it's almost like they're robots. They just either kind of recoil from you, or they don't understand what you're saying, or they're not processing what you're saying. And he says those are people who are just like a part of the dream. They're like natives of the dream world, right? So like, don't take it personally if they don't respond to them, but don't to what you say, but also don't like mistreat them. They're just like serving their purpose. They're almost like extras, in our reality. And then the next phase, I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, but I believe he's saying like the next phase from that is like just other dreamers who've stumbled into this dream world, and they're kind of living their own dreams, and they're really stuck in the dream. So if you try to tell them, hey, this is a dream, like, they're almost like the first group of people, but they're not part of that dream world. They're part of our world, and they've wandered into this dream world, and they're not lucid dreaming at all. So when you become a lucid dreamer and you try to, talk to them, because they haven't learned to lucid dream, they are kind of stuck in their own dreams. So they kind of wander around like, their eyes kind of more or less, grayed out, and they're kind of just really in there. They're lost in the illusion, more or less. Then there are other lucid dreamers, right? And there are other people who have learned to become conscious in this dream world, and you can more or less talk to them and learn from them and things of that nature. But there are people like you and me who have learned to lucid dream as well. And so they're now conscious in that reality, right? And they're wandering around, and you can communicate with them. Which actually, that would be an interesting experiment if you did run into, once you learned how to lucid dream, you then ran into like another lucid dreamer in this dream world, and then you exchanged like email addresses or whatever, and then they contacted you in real life. Like, wouldn't that be fucking mind-blowing? Right. And then the fourth group of people are like spiritual guides. And they are like the opposite of the first group of people, where they're of that world, more or less, or they might even come from different worlds, but they come to the dream world to communicate with other people through their dreams. And then the fifth group of people are like the gurus. Like, they have their own consciousness. They are, like these like non-corporeal entities, and they kind of wander around, and you go to them. They're more like spiritual guides, but like even more advanced. And it's wild. Then I started thinking like, okay, I feel like I should be applying this stuff to like our waking world, like to this reality, right? So for example, there have been people that I've tried to talk to in this reality and say, hey, you do realize like none of this shit is real, right? Which obviously that sounds quote unquote crazy to the general public or whatever, but some people will largely get hostile. Or some people just look at you blankly, like, what are you talking about? And then your response to that is, well, what do you mean? What am I talking about? How come you found yourself awake in a reality and you'd never stop to ask yourself, like, what is this world? So there's that group of people, right? It's referenced in the book of lucid dreaming, but we could see echoes of that in our world, where they're just these one-dimensional people that they don't really think. They kind of act like everybody else for the most part. They're extremely programmed. You know who I'm talking about. So there's that. And then you mean like people who kind of are conscious of the fact that, okay, something's not quite right in this world, but they don't want to take it a step further because they're caught up in like their bullshit of just daily living, right? Their job, their bills, when their next paycheck is coming. Like there's a part of them that knows, okay, this isn't right, but they're pulled into the deception of it all, the rat race of it all, the illusion of this reality. So you can't really quite get to them, but you know that there's someone in there that's curious and awake, as opposed to like the first group of people where when you try to talk to them, it's like talking to a plant, more or less. Then the really rare people where you talk to them and you go, life is like a fucking game, right? And they're like, yeah, I know. And you're like, oh shit, wait, you're awake? And they're like, yeah. No, I've been there. Yeah, I know, I get it. I've been where you are now, and I'm full on lucid, and I'm just living life or whatever. And yes, I'm very aware that none of this is real, that we're living in a simulation, or Maya, or Leela, or whatever you want to call it, right? There are those people. Then you meet the fucking spirit guides, right? These are the people that will say something to the effect of, yes, I'm aware that this is a simulation. I've actually been playing in the simulation for a really long time. I keep coming back to the simulation so I can help people like you who are also waking up and realizing this isn't a simulation, or this isn't real, and to help you out of it. All right, so the spirit guides. And then the gurus, which I'm thinking like you probably have to go to fucking like Nepal or the Himalayas or fucking India or something, deep down in the jungles to talk to these people, because they're just so far like ahead of the curve that they just, they're just like meditating on the top of a mountain somewhere, just like repeatedly, right? How is that any different from the people that were mentioned in the dream world, in that book of lucid dreaming? Like, it seems like they're more or less the same, which then tells me like, wait, if that world, the dream world, isn't real, even though it feels real while you're dreaming, what makes us think that this is any more real? Right? Like a few things. So and I'm like trying to like corral all my random thoughts that want to jump, because I don't want to like, they want to jump out, because I don't want to just jump from one topic to one topic and not finish it, finish that thought. I'm trying to pull everything together. But there was this one thought I had, first of all, for the level 1 people, both in the dream world and in our reality. The level 1 people, I have had conversations with people where I've asked them, and this is when I was younger, I don't do that anymore, I'm in my 30s now, but like in my 20s and my like late teens, like in high school and college, I've tried to turn to certain people, my peers or whatever, and ask them a simple question like, do you ever ask yourself like, what the fuck we're doing here? And time again, for the most part, like 98% of the people that I talk to look at me like, why are you even thinking like that? Like, why can't you just go with it? Like, why do you care? Why are you so worried about it? Like, what is wrong with you? Why are you even thinking? Like, they're almost questioning like why I'm even having like a free thought. And as I've gotten older, there was a time when that response would make me pause and think, well, shit, is there something wrong with me? But then I came up with this illusion, rather, and I'm going to share it with you. Okay. If you woke up, this is a story, right? If you woke up in a house, right? You woke up in a mansion. You opened your eyes, you were asleep, and all of a sudden you woke up in a mansion. You looked around, and there were other people in that mansion, young people, old people, or whatever, right? And the mansion was fully stocked with food, right? And you had plenty of food, super easy, lots to drink or whatever, but you're surrounded by like a bunch of random ass people, and you don't remember how you got into that mansion, right? So you get up and you go talk to the first person, and you say, well, how did we get here? And that person looks at you and says, what are you talking about? And your response is like, what the fuck do you mean? What am I talking about? What are we doing in this mansion? And they say, I don't know. Why are you that worried about it? Who's the crazy person here? The person who has found themselves in a situation and has no questions about it, or the person who's naturally inquisitive about the situation that they found themselves in? Now, imagine you go outside. You're like, okay, fuck this. You walk to the door, but then you are told as you get to the door, hey, listen, the air outside of the door, right, is unbreathable. So if you leave the front door, you won't be able to breathe. There's only oxygen within the house, or within a small bubble around the house. Let me extend that. Let's just say you can go maybe 3 feet away from the front door, but after that, it's just like unbreathable and everything is dark. It's just, there's a searchlight around the house, right, to make sure that the house is lit 12 hours a day. But other than that, it's just pitch darkness everywhere else. You wouldn't have questions? What if when you went 3 feet past the house and you took like a telescope or whatever, you looked and you were able to see that there were other mansions around you, about 8 other mansions around you, but all the mansions seem dilapidated, run down, empty. So overall, everywhere you looked, all these other mansions have nobody living in them. The only mansion that has people in it is your mansion. And you can maybe like send like one of those robot cars or whatever and drive it to the other mansions, but you can't physically walk to the other mansion so you can look inside of the house and find out what happened to the people that live in the house. Wouldn't you have fucking questions? Wouldn't you say, okay, who put us here? What are we doing here? Why are we just, it's almost like you're fucking under quarantine, right? Right? Like right now, right? And you can't leave. And you asking questions are like, why are we locked here in the first place? And nobody has the answer. And it almost seems like you've been quarantined for a very long time, almost long enough for the people that have come prior to forget what was the reason behind the quarantine in the first place. That's fucking Earth. All right? Think about it. Earth, we can't get past low orbit. Every scientist will say that we can't get past. Or if you believe we went to the moon, okay, kudos on you, whatever. But there's plenty of other scientists that have said, NASA scientists that have said, we cannot go past low orbit repeatedly. Okay. But Earth is this beautiful blue planet that has water, that has a teeming with intelligent life, not just humans, like literally billions of different species overall, all living in one planet. But then you look around when you can't leave, right? Once you get past a certain region of our atmosphere, that's it. It's too cold. You can't breathe the air. There's no oxygen, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That's it. All right. And then you take out our telescopes, we look around and we see all these other planets are like uninhabited. And then I'm saying, okay, well, what the fuck are we doing here? It seems like we're under some sort of quarantine, right? There's like a constant spotlight, like constantly, we're constantly revolving around the spotlight or whatever. It gives us, light and darkness. It controls our seasons. If we get too close or too warm, or if we get too close, it gets hot. If we pull away, it gets cooler. And that's how we have the seasons and everything like that. But what the fuck are we doing here? And why are we here with a bunch of other fucking like animals and plants and everything? It seems like somebody kind of saw the necessity of a quarantine, took all these species from all over the place, collected them into, or I should say from all other planets that were once living, in my opinion, collected them into one planet, Earth, and then locked shit out so nothing could get in and nothing could get out. I mean, we're living in the time of a quarantine right now. Look at your pantry. You just have all sorts of random shit that you probably wouldn't have bought before. We have way too much oatmeal. I don't know what we're going to do with all this oatmeal. I don't know why I bought this much oatmeal. I don't even like oatmeal like that. But we also have like canned food. Like it's like all this stuff that, you have in your pantry that now you almost are going to have to eat because we don't know how long this is going to go on for. But clearly, just imagine that this quarantine were to happen for generations upon generations upon generations, and then nobody ever left their house. And nobody remembered the reason why we were quarantined in the first place. Right? That's Earth. More or less. And so the motherfuckers that are like, okay, why are we fucking here in the first place? The rest of the world are calling those people crazy for asking questions. Why? I'm not fucking crazy for wanting to figure out what the fuck we're doing here. Anyway, that's just a whole other sidebar. I just want you to think about that. The next time you ask a question like, hey, what are we doing here? And somebody says, don't ask those questions. You need to be more concerned about that person's sanity than your own, because it's normal. in my opinion, that if you find yourself in a situation and or circumstance where you don't understand what you're doing there or how you got there, to ask fucking questions. And so because we live in a society where you're largely discouraged from asking questions, any person that asks questions is demonized, ostracized, and labeled as crazy. So anyway, back to the lucid dreaming part. So we have those people who, in our reality, they don't ask questions. They just kind of go along with it. And if you say, hey, does this feel real to you? They look at you like, why are you even asking this? And then you have other people that are starting to kind of wonder the same thing as you, but because they're so locked in the cycle of, mental, enslavement, trying to get your bills paid, trying to get money to eat, trying to work, trying to meet the next goal and the next goal and the next goal while battling, your own psyche and battling the psyche of others. You almost can't, you're so stuck. Those people are so stuck in the heaviness of the construct of reality that they can't delve in further to what that means. Then you meet the people who have maybe broken away a bit from society, for better or worse, and they look up and they go, yeah, this is definitely a dream, and I'm consciously creating the reality that I find myself in. And then you have the spirit guides that we have, and then we have the guru. How do we know that this isn't some type of dream too? I mean, the same sort of levels of people exist in this world that exists in the other world that we call the dream world. And I would also say, too, that same dream world, I believe people are accessing both when they sleep, but also when they take certain drugs. And I think that certain drugs like LSD more or less allow you to, I would say that LSD is basically a lucid dreaming drug. It should be called LDD, lucid synthetic drug, right? It allows you to dream while you're still, let me phrase it like this. It allows you to access that other dream world while you're still present in this world. Towards the end of that book, the Lucid Dreaming Field Guide, it actually says that there are people like yogis and like experienced lucid dreamers that are able to access other worlds, particularly that dream world, from this reality, from our waking reality, quote unquote, waking reality. And so if they can do it with practice and meditation, I'm sure that LSD basically allows you to do the exact same thing. The same way you can probably meditate a headache away, but fucking Tylenol will allow you to do the exact same thing, more or less. Oh, side note, in the last episode, the first few moments of the previous episodes, I talked about grapefruit seed extract. Make sure you dilute it. Don't take it at full strength. Follow the instructions if you do decide to go that route. I just want to share that with you. But anyway, anything that you can achieve with the psyche can also be achieved with drugs, and vice versa. Anything you can achieve with drugs can also be achieved with psyche. You can lower your blood pressure with a blood pressure medication, but you can also meditate your blood pressure down. There have been yogis and fucking monks and stuff that can control their heart rates consciously, control their inner metabolism consciously, their body temperature. They can warm their body up with their minds. All right. So if you can do something with your mind, a drug can basically do the same thing. I've even had experiences when I stay on top of my meditation and I'm reading my books on a daily, basis. And I lock in, particularly when I'm painting, because I really don't have space to think when I'm painting. So if I'm painting and then reading certain books on like spirituality or philosophy or whatever it is, I will actually shift my mind. And then I'm fasting on top of that. I actually start feeling the same effects as I would if I had taken like a bunch of weed. So I think that's all LSD does. It maybe damages your brain in a particular way that allows you to access that same dream world, which I'm starting to think of as a physical, quote unquote, physical, for lack of a better word, destination, but consciously. the same way a person who's been well versed in lucid dreaming can. I want to share with you my lucid dream and how I was able to wake up my very first lucid dream. It was before I read this book. This was like a couple of 3 years ago. I went through like a phase where my body just decided it was going to just be allergic to like everything that I ate, particularly spicy foods. And so for like a good 6 months or so, I had to be very mindful of eating spicy foods. So much so that and this was my mind doing this to me, like if I had something with just a hint of black pepper, I would start getting like pain behind my eyes, more or less. So I was very, very, like all the foods that I ate for a very long time were like highly controlled. And it was just the same 3 or 4 foods over and over again because I knew that those foods would not have anything in it. And I didn't go out, I prepared all my food, and it was just very plain. And so that was my life for like a long period of time. But then when I went to sleep, I was in this like hotel, and they had like a platter, and it had like red hot sauce and shrimp. And my dream self grabbed the shrimp and dipped it directly into the pepper and threw it directly in my mouth. And that was what made me conscious, because like I would have never done that at that time in my waking reality. So that was like my reality check. Wait a minute. That's not something that Joe would do in this reality. Oh shit, I'm in a dream. And that's what made me conscious. Now, because I'd never had a lucid dream before, I didn't know what to do. For those of you who don't know what lucid dream is, I would say like probably a little too late, 42 minutes in. You probably should have Googled it this whole time. But it's like being conscious in your dream. Anyway, I was like, oh my God, I'm dreaming. So I was like running around like, oh shit, what am I going to do first? And so I was like, well, I'm in LA. So I started summoning like celebrities, and I was like, we're going to party with Snoop. So I like imagined Snoop Dogg, and I imagined Ludacris and like Mariah Carey. And then I like started flying. So I was like, okay, cool. So I was like, let me fly. So I started flying. That was cool. And then I had like a party. It was like a Snoop Dogg party. And it was like a swim party, and there was like slides and everything, like just every crazy shit that I could imagine. I didn't do anything fun, right? Like I wasn't like, ooh, who's this really sexy, like Idris Elba? Like I didn't even go there. I was just like walling out, like running around. Then I saw this like guy that was kind of standing there. And so I run up to him and I said, hey, you're dreaming, wake up. And I was like trying to shake him. But every time I would try to tell him, wake up, you're dreaming, he would like static, like he would go zzz, and he would just like kind of shake, or like the whole image of him would like go into static, like old school TVs, it was like zzz. And I was like, okay, that's weird. But I was like, all right, well, here's my email address. And I gave him my actual email address, and I gave him my phone number, and I said, if you want to contact me if you remember this. But every time I try to give him my contact information, he would like glitch. And I was like, all right, that's weird. And anyway, so I left him, and I went back to like partying. And then when I woke up, I felt so good. Like I was like so elated, and I was cracking up. I was like, that was like the best fucking dream ever. And I was like telling my husband everything that happened, and he was just like, that's really weird. I was like, I know, like I'd never been awake in a dream before. And since then, I've been trying to get back to that. And I'm hoping, over the next few months of like practicing what I've read in that book, and I've downloaded other books on lucid dreaming. So that's what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks or so while we're on this vacation. I'm going to really try to delve into it. And if I do, I'm going to, report back and let you guys know like what it's like. But anyway, I'm not entirely sure what the point of all of that was. I think what I'm trying to get at is this reality, and on the March 20th, that's it. That's where I was going. After March 20th, after this Friday, I started to think about what this means overall, in the grand sense of things, right? In the grand scheme of things. What does it mean to sort of think that you're going to die and then not die? And then I started to think, okay, like I've made several jokes because a couple of my friends have texted me like, well, you're still alive. And I'm like, yeah. And I made jokes to the effect of, maybe it was the coronavirus that killed me in my last incarnation. And so by listening to the promptings of my higher consciousness to way back in December, start binge watching, early January, start binge watching old episodes of The Twilight Zone and everything, like leading me down. Like I look back at the path that I took from just these sort of intuitive promptings, like, okay, watch The Twilight Zone. Okay, fine. Watch this episode. Okay, fine. Sit here and paint this red woman, and like all the things that drew me to that culminating point of March 20th. Watch out, be careful for that week, has been so fascinating to me. So fascinating to me. And so I made a joke with one of my friends today, like, well, maybe, this virus actually killed me in my last incarnation. And so my higher self, used my fascination with the Twilight Zone, kind of implanted that, but, quietly drove me to that date and to watch that episode and to be mindful of that date so that I would be extra cautious that week and, skip death, and then I was like, well, what does that mean? What does it all mean? This last few days there was another thing that I'd said, that maybe a part of me, maybe it's not me physically that dies, or maybe I do die, or maybe there are listeners in another reality that are waiting for this episode that's never going to come to them, and so for them, my last episode about the aliens was the last episode they were going to get. This is not me pulling this stuff out of my ass. Like, these are things that have been, theorized by quantum physicists. We don't really know what's going on because most of the time we're not paying attention, right? But I was saying, like, I had said, like, maybe it's not like me physically dying, that maybe there's a part of me, like maybe the mind or the persona or the false self or the ego dies. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not the same person that I was before the 20th. One of the biggest thing is, that voice in your head that's always negative, that says the craziest shit to you. I almost never hear it anymore. There's just been this really good, like, chill calm over me. I'm not as tense or as critical as I used to be anymore. It almost feels like all the books and all the mantras and all the experiences and all the things that I've gone through culminated on Friday the 20th to make it so that I've become a completely different thing. Like I said, the voice in my head. Okay, let me backtrack. I am a Virgo, which I don't know if you know a lot about Virgos, but they're literally the worst. And I can say that because I'm a Virgo. And not only am I a Virgo, I'm a Virgo that was raised by a Virgo, which I love my mom very much. I really do. But Virgos are very, like, tense and very critical and perfectionist. I mean, like, and judgmental. They walk in and they see something wrong in every situation. And I'm sure they have good sides too. And while I love the fact that, all those things that I mentioned about being a perfectionist and things like that have been great and have gotten me to where I am in life now, when you have that voice in your head that's like a Virgo as your voice in your head, it's not pleasant. Right. And I was like, my name on this podcast is Joanna, the Overthinker. And I'm not going to really change that. It is what it is. But if you give me something, I will overthink about it. It was just a gift. And what I noticed leading up until the 20th and now, afterwards is I used to go before where if you told me one day that I would be able to go 3 seconds without thinking something, I would say, I would literally, like, what kind of drug would you be giving me for that? And now I would say that I might have an errant thought maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times a day. For the most part, I am largely present. For the most part. It's been wonderful. There is a beautiful absolutely beautiful piece of music written by Abel Korzeniowski. I'm pretty sure I just destroyed his last name. I was listening to a playlist that I have on Spotify. It's called Jolie Artist Painting Music. And I think I was getting like a bunch of text messages from like everybody, about this virus and all these things. And I remember just putting my phone on silent, and something reminded me. It's almost like I forgot about music because I spent so much time reading books. And I went and I played this song. It's off the Penny Dreadful soundtrack, but probably one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. The song is called Be True by Abel Korzeniowski. Be True. Now, if you can close your eyes and listen to that, and I've listened to that song countless times before. Before I would listen to Audible, when I painted, I would just listen to this, to the theme song of like classical music because I like classical music. But my God, when I played that song, the way it starts off, it reminded me of everything that was going on, that is going on right now. So it starts off with this heavy bass, right? And I closed my eyes and I could see what was happening to us. The whole entire world, this heavy bass, right? There's this negativity and the fear, and it's very, just very ominous and very frightening, and it's death and it's, darkness, and then all of a sudden you hear this pitch of music. It breaks away from the bass of it, and it's just this. I can't even. You just have to listen to it, but it's so high. It goes high, and all of a sudden, I could see everything, guys. I could see everything that was happening to us right now, right? We're all vibrating down here, right? Everybody from Alan Watts to Stephen Hawking's to Brian Greene, to fucking Eckhart Tolle. And all these other people, I'm putting them from scientists to philosophers, have all said that everything vibrates. Even the word human, if you break it down, hum, that's a vibration. Everything vibrates. And so we're all collectively, for the most part, vibrating on this very low tone, right? Across the world. I've talked about this in other podcasts, how this is unprecedented, where simultaneously all of humanity is afraid right now. I partly joked that if we're being observed by aliens right now, and they're constantly monitoring us, and all of a sudden they went to New York and LA right now, they would probably think we all fucking wiped ourselves out because the streets are all empty. I mean, it looks like a scene out of fucking Walking Dead or fucking I Am Legend or something, right? Where everything's just deserted. If they didn't know what was going on, they would look and say, what happened to all the humans? So everything is vibrating super low right now and just very dark and very heavy, and everybody's afraid, right? And that's how the music starts off as. But then you hear this high pitch. I think it was the just a string instrument, and it breaks away from everything. And it's dun, 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 and it's just playing. It's like it's, rebelling against the darkness and the lowness of it all. And then but it gets pulled back down a bit. And then every time it pulls down, the bass kind of reduces, and the music kind of gets like higher, and higher and higher. And then it crescendos into this just beautiful, just all these strings and the piano and everything coming together. And it's just like, I'm listening to this and I'm seeing humanity. I'm seeing what we're going through right now in humanity. And all I could think of is, man, it only takes just one person to be that high pitched instrument that says, fear is a choice. Fear is a choice. And just that one person, that one soul, that one spirit from the collective that breaks away and pulls it all up, can pull the rest of us up to a higher vibration, and that higher string and that crescendo, and just pull us all up out of this lowness and this low vibrational wavelength that we're all kind of vibrating in right now, and make beautiful music. That's what I was thinking. As I'm thinking that, my eyes are closed and I'm listening to this music, fucking tears just streaming down my face. I am the most cynical, sarcastic, like fucking, like person that you've ever met. And yes, I'm an artist, but still, like, that's not, I'm this dry kind of cynical, artist. But it's like, even if you go back to listen to like the things that I talked about in the earlier part of this podcast compared to what I'm talking about now, as in, and by earlier, I mean like the first few episodes or whatever, compared to what I'm talking about today, it's like a completely different person. But as I'm listening, I listened to it once, and then I called my husband in, and I don't even give a shit like what he's thinking about me. I was like, listen to this part. This is what we're going through right now. And he's like, I say, do you hear the bass? Do you hear the darkness? I said, that's the media. That's the fear. That's the darkness. He said, yeah, it's got a very ominous tone to it. And I said, yes, listen to that. Now listen to that. The pitch, it breaks away. You could see what the composer was trying to show with just the strings and with all the instruments. It was like painting a beautiful movie from the music. I'm crying tears. And all of a sudden, like, my hands are in the air and I'm just like fucking conducting the music, and I'm just so in the moment and just not giving a fuck. My windows are open. I'm sure my neighbors were probably watching me thinking, what the fuck is this bitch doing? But I just didn't care. I thought about the people in Spain, the cops, the videos that I saw, the police officers, while people are in their homes, pull out of their cars and just start playing music. And I thought about, like, this is us. This is us. This is us. This is humanity. This is us. All the jokes, all the people who, despite all of this, are trying to make each other laugh. My daughter has been coughing. I found myself coughing for a while there, and I started to think, well, maybe I just allow fear to fucking manifest these symptoms. And so I fucking took off the mask, and when I sat outside in the sun, and I grabbed my daughter and I just held her. I said, I love you, kiddo. I don't fucking care. I love you. That's the best of us. It just takes a few to break away from the darkness. I'm not saying fucking say fuck the law and go outside and fucking break the social distancing and things like that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we can get past this if we can vibrate higher. We can go listen to that song, for fuck's sake. Go listen to it, because you listen to me talking to it and describing it to you doesn't do anything. You got to hear it. You got to sit down, fucking stop, turn off the fucking news, stop listening, stop worrying, turn that music up, let the music fucking drown in the music and listen to it, and tell me that doesn't speak to what is happening to us right now. It just takes a few of us to lift the rest of us, to raise the music. And more importantly, even in the darkest and the base of life, that's still music, guys. That's still music. That high-pitched sound of whatever instrument that was, the violin or the whatever, that made that. If it didn't have that doom, that bass to kind of counter that high pitch, it wouldn't have that same effect that it did. It wouldn't move me in the same way. Just as if it was just the bass, it wouldn't move me the same way. It needed the opposite. It needed the balance of the darkness and the light, of the low and the high, of the bass and the treble combined together by law. Right? Those bars where you put the treble clef in the bass when you write music and the notes. The laws, those bars signify the law. We need the law. But those bars and the placement of these notes is how we make the music that we call life, guys. Life is a fucking symphony. So even this dark part that we're going through right now, it just needs this bass that we're going through right now, just needs a few of us to be the treble that raises the rest of us collectively away from the darkness and raises our vibration. It's all vibration, guys. It's all string theory. Two things. One, if I can accidentally say I want everybody to stay home on March 20th and watch it happen, we can all consciously, everybody listening to this right now, if we all just chose, fear is a choice, if we all just chose to not get sucked into the bass, if we all just chose to be the treble that balances all this bass, collectively we can create something like a beautiful symphony. You know, if we all chose to be there for each other, when everybody is afraid, to say, look, don't be afraid, we'll get through this. All right, that's that violin, that high-pitched noise. You know, the bass is going to be there, but it has to be there because that's part of the music. It doesn't mean we shouldn't bemoan its existence, the darkness, the dark times, the trying times, the media, you know, the negative Nellies, the fear. It's there. But that's part of the music. You need that to balance the high notes, to put everything into place. When I paint, what brings my paintings to form, it's not the middle tones. It's not just the middle tones. I've got to add shadow, but I also have to add the highlights. And so it's a combination of the mid-tones and the darkness, the shadows, and the whites, the highlights, that makes the painting beautiful, that brings it true to form, that makes it real. So today, I want you to get, what I want you to get from all of this is this. The bass will always be there, guys. It's part of the symphony. The suffering, the pain, it's there. It is, it's there. But the world right now, particularly, needs the treble, the crescendos, the high-pitched, the violin to balance out the bass and the strings, right? We need that balance. We need that to pull it and pull the rest of us, right? Because if you listen to that Be True song, when that first tone goes high, and I know I sound crazy right now. I know. I don't fucking care though, because I know that you're either going to get it or you're not. But if I don't say this, if I don't put it out there, then it doesn't go anywhere. So even if I'm speaking to one person, that one person is enough. Just like that one tone in that song, go fucking listen to it. Close your eyes. Forget about everything else for a second. And go play that song. Play it as loud as you fucking can. All it needed was one tone, but if you listen, you start to see, with your eyes closed, you start to see that one pitch was enough to all of a sudden bring the rest of the music from the bass to the mid-level, and it just became just this light and inspiring song, this beautiful piece. And we have the chance to do that now. Be that. Be that. Maybe I did die on March 20th. I know for sure I had in the past several times. Probably more times than I'm aware of, which then means what the fuck am I afraid of? Would there have been a version of myself that would have been afraid to even talk about what I'm talking to now, let alone publish it? Yes, but that version of myself is gone. She died. It died on that day. And leading up to that, I would argue it's been dying this whole time. I'm not going to bemoan the darkness. I'm not going to bemoan the bass for existing. Right? I don't bemoan my nightmares because my nightmares are part of my psyche. It means that there's something there that I need to learn from. There's something there I need to face. There's something there that I need to overcome. Because by overcoming it, by breaking away from it, not running away from it, breaking free from it, I can move on to the next thing. I can move. Otherwise, the same nightmare will keep recurring over and over and over and over again. Your life, all the darkness of your life, all the bad things that have happened to your life happened for a reason. They were the bass in your own symphony that is your life. And then your consciousness, decided to take that and become an alchemist and make it beautiful. And you still can. We can take what's happening right now. Remember I said a couple of things too. The gods don't sell us any good without the cost of some evil. Well, hey, God damn it. We as a collective society are paying for something good that's coming up with all this evil that we're experiencing right now. Look on the bright side. Something good is coming. I don't know when. But if we're collectively this low, vibrating this low, there's something's going to break away and be high. That's just nature. It's balance. Everything is balance. All is mind. I guarantee you, all these cases that they're finding right now of this virus, I would probably be willing to bet that a lot of them are psychosomatic cases, and that they let the media and the news into their mind, into their psyche, and allowed their minds to manifest symptoms of what they're experiencing now. So they tell you a cough, and I was one of that too. They tell you a cough, a running nose, a sneezing, that's it, and then boom, it gets worse. And so you input that into your mind. You drill that into your head every day. Eventually, your mind will manifest that. I mean, that's how it works. Everything that you have in your life right now, both good and bad, has been a manifestation of your own mind. And so if it can manifest negative things, why can't it manifest positive things too? They say all is mind and all is one. They say we're alone together. I always thought the words all and one were all one. You put it all together and it spells alone. We're alone together in this world. We look around and it's like that mansion, right? We look around and all the other mansions are uninhabited. It's just us. And we're fighting each other over this bullshit and that bullshit, but it's just us. It's just us. And so if we can let fear collectively bring us down, it only takes a few people to raise the vibration of all of us. They have said this. These have been proven by researchers whose names escape me right now. I think Dean Radin might be one of the researchers I'm thinking about, who said that they took monks and meditators and put them collectively together and had them meditate in like inner cities. And just the collective minds of people meditating for good was enough to see statistically significant drops on violent crime in that area. That's the mind. And so what I'm trying to do is implore everybody that's hearing my voice right now. I understand that, yes, you almost can't get away from this virus thing. And I was very reluctant to even talk about it, but here we are. You can't get away from it. It seems like you can't get away from it. But you know what I did? Maybe it's easier for me to do this because I'm in California and it's nice and sunny today. But I put my phone away. And I took my little speaker and I went outside and I played my playlist on my classical music. And I sat and I watched the birds and I watched the wind. And I looked at the plants and looked at the trees. And I said, they're not worrying about anything right now. Neither should you.